My head was spinning from the wine. When I opened my eyes, a red wedding veil was covering my face. A handsome man in red wedding clothes lifted it with a stick. My best friend had really delivered. She promised me a good-looking guy who had never been with a woman, and here he was. He offered me the wedding wine cup. I drank it in one go, then pushed him down onto the bed. One thing led to another, and we spent the whole night together. He had good stamina but was a bit rough, so I gave him 3.5 stars in my head. The next morning I woke up sore and exhausted. I slipped out of bed, put on my clothes, and suddenly a flood of memories hit me that were not my own. I had transmigrated into a novel. Worse, I had become the cannon-fodder character who shared my exact name, Yuan Shu, a princess destined to die at the hands of bandits during exile. The female lead, my stepsister Su Wanwan, was a reborn woman who came back to rearrange everyone's fate, including mine. Her story ended happily. Mine did not. I remembered leaving a 1-star review on this very novel back in my modern world. I had not even insulted the author. Yet here I was. Back home, the apocalypse had been approaching. I had awakened 2 abilities, fire and wood, the wood one letting me grow plants. My rich best friend had pushed me to live a little before the end of the world came. That led to the hotel plan, which went wrong, which led to a broken elevator on the 28th floor, which led to me dying and somehow waking up here. The first thing I did was test my wood ability on a flower pot by the bed. Buds sprouted immediately. My powers survived the transmigration. That was a relief. Then my new husband woke up, confused, asking who had hit him. I looked at his abs, kept a straight face, and told him he had done it to himself. When my new husband finished getting dressed, I noticed scratch marks on his back too. Before I could look away, he suddenly covered his nose and shouted, "Wife, I'm bleeding everywhere." I put my head in my hands. Other women in novels get husbands who just pretend to be foolish. Mine was actually foolish. I quickly stuffed a handkerchief over his face to stop the bleeding and hide the evidence. Just then, the maids knocked on the door to come serve us. I let them in and calmly told them his nosebleed was an old condition, so they would not ask questions. They believed me and went to fetch the doctor. After he left for the doctor, my personal maid Chwer helped me get ready, teary-eyed. She felt sorry that I had to spend my life with a fool. I told her to stop crying. Leaving my stepfamily behind was not necessarily a bad thing. My life before this marriage had not been great. My real father died early, my mother remarried, and my stepfather brought along my stepsister Su Wanwan. When my half-brother was born, a fortune teller said he and I clashed, so I was sent away to a farm outside the city. I only came back for holidays like a guest. I had been brought home just a month ago, and the family had originally planned to send Su Wanwan to marry into this royal household, not me. That changed at the last minute. I walked to the front hall to serve the morning tea, which was a required tradition for a new bride on her second day. The royal residence was stunning, even more grand than the novel had described. The family had built their wealth over generations, and the prince's grandmother had been especially clever with business, opening shops across the city. What a shame it would all be seized by the emperor soon. The Pei family had served the country loyally for generations. The prince's father and the prince himself had been called the kingdom's war gods. But a year ago, both went missing or were injured during battle, all because the current emperor was jealous of their power and wanted to destroy the family. I needed to think carefully about how to survive this. Going back to my modern world was not possible. And even if I could, the apocalypse was coming there. My best bet was to quietly build a good life here and live out my days peacefully. In the front hall, I met my mother-in-law, Ji Wanqing. She was elegant and gentle. His younger siblings were there too, watching me without warmth or hostility, just curiosity. I served her tea and bowed properly. She seemed pleased and stood up to give me a bracelet from her own wrist, saying it was a family heirloom passed down to each new wife. Then she mentioned something interesting. The bracelet was one of a matching pair, and the other one had been in my family. Our great-great-grandmothers had been relatives. Before I could process that, my husband came back looking pale. The doctor had confirmed his nosebleed was just an old condition, Nothing serious. Nothing serious now, I thought quietly. Later is another story. We sat down for breakfast. The spread was incredible. Back in my stepfamily's house, I had always been given the worst food. Since this whole royal residence was about to be taken away in 2 days anyway, I planned to eat as much as possible. Just as I had that thought, my wrist suddenly felt warm. I touched the bracelet, and then I saw it. A vast, endless space, like a warehouse stretching as far as the eye could see. A storage space. It had arrived. Nobody at the breakfast table noticed anything strange. I quietly touched the bracelet again and confirmed it. The storage space was real. Inside the space, I could see a sand timer with the number 2 carved on it. Looking around, I nearly jumped with excitement. My private clinic and pharmacy from the modern world had come with me, full of medicines, equipment, everything. Even better, the space looked big enough to fit an entire city inside. If the Emperor is coming to take everything anyway, I might as well empty this place out first. I tried to reach for things inside the space, but I could only grab items near the front counter. Everything else I could see, but not touch. Frustrating, but still useful. While I was thinking, my mother-in-law gently called me back to eat. I made up a quick excuse about being used to warm family meals. Chwaer backed me up, explaining that I had rarely eaten with family growing up. The 2 younger siblings, Pei Shir and Pei Yun, immediately started putting food in my bowl to make me feel welcome. Then my husband held out an egg and fed it to me directly. Not as foolish as he looks. Before we could relax, a message arrived from the palace. The Emperor and Empress were summoning us to serve tea. My mother-in-law thought nothing of it. She said the Emperor and my husband's family had always been close, and the Empress treated my husband like a son. I said nothing, but inside I was cold. I had read this novel. I knew the truth. The Emperor was jealous of the Pei family's military power and had secretly allowed the Crown Prince to destroy them. A year ago, it was the Pei family who had fought and nearly died protecting the kingdom, but the Crown Prince took all the credit. My husband had been in a coma for 6 months after a head injury. He woke up with the mind of a child, and his martial arts ability was gone. The Emperor pretended to be kind by keeping my husband's noble title. But the family was about to be accused of treason and embezzlement, all false charges, and sentenced to exile. This invitation to the palace was not a friendly tea visit. It was a trap. In the novel, this was exactly where the tragedy began. My husband would be badly beaten, and the journey into exile would nearly kill him. I asked my mother-in-law if we could refuse. She said no. Refusing an imperial summons would be seen as defiance. She also still trusted the Emperor and Empress completely. There was no point telling her the truth. She would not believe me, and I would only make things worse for myself. Fine. We go. Back in our room to prepare, I slipped into the storage space and took out an emergency contraceptive pill. Last night had been wild, and I was not taking chances. I also grabbed a padded seat cushion that had come with the pharmacy opening promotion. It was one of the few things I could actually reach from near the counter. When I came back out, my husband stared at the cushion curiously. What is that? Something useful. Take off your trousers and put this on. He immediately covered his belt with both hands, clearly remembering what had happened the night before. I am your wife. Do as I say, and I will give you a sweet. I figured he would be easy to manage with a little coaxing. But he lifted his chin and said firmly, Yunny said too many sweets rot your teeth. I do not want one. This fool had principles, apparently. I had no patience for his excuses. I told him the cushion was special. Only he had one, not his mother or siblings, and that he must keep it secret. His eyes lit up immediately. He loved being the only one with something special. Easy. On the way to the palace, I thought through what was coming. According to the novel, my husband would be beaten badly today, punished by the Emperor. Without proper medicine on the road to exile, he would nearly die. I could not stop the beating entirely, but at least the cushion would protect the worst of it. When we arrived, the palace made a sign to escort us clearly had orders to mess with us. She claimed the sedan chairs were being repaired and made us walk, taking the long way on purpose. I did not mind. I used it to my advantage. I pulled out a hairpin and gave it to the maid, acting like a simple country girl who knew nothing. I asked her innocent questions. What was that building? Why were there so many guards over there? She relaxed and answered freely, thinking I was harmless and dim. That was how I found out where the royal treasury was. Perfect. Before we leave for exile, I will come back and help myself to a few things. After half an hour of walking, we finally reached the Empress's palace. Inside were 3 richly dressed women, the Empress Dowager, the Empress, and the Crown Princess. My husband waved at them cheerfully, like he was greeting old friends. I gave a proper, composed bow. Before any of them could say something sharp, I spoke first. I told them my mother-in-law had praised all 3 of them endlessly. The Empress Dowager's kindness, the Empress's warm nature, the Crown Princess's grace and elegance. I said I had been told to learn from them, so I would not embarrass the family. Then I added, with a humble sigh, that I was afraid I could never match their natural refinement no matter how hard I tried. Shameless flattery, but it works. Years of workplace experience taught me that much. They immediately decided I was harmless. A bit of a people-pleaser, not very impressive, nothing to worry about. Good. That was exactly what I wanted them to think. They asked me various questions throughout the visit. I gave vague, useless answers. When I sensed it was the right moment, I sweetly suggested we should serve tea to the Emperor as well, which got the meal preparations moving quickly. The Crown Princess then offered to take me to the Imperial Garden. My husband insisted on coming too. His mother had told him to stay by my side at all times. He followed me around like a large, loyal dog, grabbing the hem of my skirt, so he would not lose me. The Crown Princess looked at him with a complicated expression. I had heard she had once tried to marry him before he was injured. She must have had many feelings about how things turned out. I ignored all of that and kept asking casual questions. What is that building? What is over there? Quietly memorizing the layout of the palace. The imperial kitchen, the treasury, the side gates. I was not just sightseeing. I was planning. After the garden tour, we were called back inside to eat with the Emperor. The Emperor and Crown Prince entered, father and son, both with scheming faces. My husband greeted the Emperor loudly and cheerfully. I quickly jumped in with a proper bow before the Emperor could study him too closely. Then my husband, bless his simple heart, asked out loud why we had not served tea yet, and whether the elders would be giving gifts in return. The room went stiff. I could see everyone holding back their anger. I apologized on his behalf, calling him childlike and harmless. But the Emperor, not wanting to look petty, produced gifts anyway. My husband handed them straight to me, like he had won a prize. I took them without hesitation. We are enemies anyway. Might as well take what I can. At the meal, I ate well and fed my husband generously too. He was already full, but I kept piling food on his plate. Eat up. You will not be back home until tomorrow, and you need strength for what is coming. The Emperor watched us with obvious contempt. Good. Let him underestimate us. After the meal, the Crown Prince suggested taking my husband for a private walk in the garden, claiming he wanted to reminisce about old times. I let them go, but kept my eyes on them the entire time. Sure enough, the Crown Prince suddenly attacked. My husband raised his arms to protect his head, but still took a blow. The Crown Prince kept going. The Crown Princess held me back, calmly saying it was just friendly sparring to help my husband recover his memory. What a shameless excuse. I needed to act without being seen. I pressed my foot lightly to the ground and used my wit ability to quietly make a nearby shrub grow outward. The branches wrapped around the Crown Prince's feet and yanked. He face-planted hard into the ground. By the time anyone looked, the shrub was back to normal. It just looked like a poorly trimmed plant in an inconvenient spot. Perfect. My ability works on people too. The Crown Prince lifted his bloody face from the dirt. My husband, nose also bleeding, pointed and laughed. You have a nosebleed too. Are you going stupid as well? Then my husband crouched down and started hitting his own head, crying that it hurt. I pressed a handkerchief to his nose and immediately asked to be allowed to leave. Old condition, needs medicine. His mother would be worried. The Crown Prince, furious and spitting blood, suggested we use the palace physician instead and had attendants move to take my husband away. My heart dropped. They were not going to let us leave easily. I tried one more time, mentioning that the Princess Dowager at home would be anxious if we returned too late. I was stalling and hoping, but I was not sure it would work. The Crown Princess stepped in and suggested I go home first while they kept my husband to be treated by the palace physician. The Crown Prince stared at me coldly. Refusing was not really an option. I thanked them warmly and left without arguing. My husband waved me off cheerfully, saying he would be home soon. Chue was uneasy on the way back. I told her not to worry, though I knew exactly what was happening. Back at the royal residence, I told my mother-in-law the situation. I expected her to be suspicious. Instead, she was relieved. She thought the palace physicians would help her son's nosebleed problem. I said nothing. Then she did something unexpected. She handed me control of the household finances, saying I was now the official lady of the house. She even gave me the key to the treasury. I pretended to hesitate before accepting. Inside, I was thrilled. The confiscation order comes tomorrow. I need to move fast. I told Chue I was exhausted and not to disturb me. The moment she dozed off outside, I slipped out through the window in plain clothes, used my ability to tunnel quietly out through the ground, and disappeared into the city. I had work to do. I knew from the novel that the road to exile would be brutal. Poor food, harsh weather. I also knew from the story summary that disasters were coming. Drought in some places, floods in others, then famine spreading across the country within a year or two. The author had even stopped updating mid-story, so I could not be sure how bad things would get. Better to over-prepare. I also noticed my ability had gotten stronger since arriving in this world, possibly because of the bracelet. Tunneling through soil now felt as easy as swimming. First, I went to a rental agency and quietly secured several empty, out-of-the-way properties across the city, paying deposits under a fake identity. Then I walked into the city's largest restaurant dressed as a young male attendant with a fake mustache. I told the manager my employer needed enormous quantities of food, all dishes, meat and vegetable, as much as they could prepare, delivered tomorrow in large buckets and pots. No fancy plating needed. When he saw the banknotes, he nearly fainted with joy. I bargained him down to 80% of the price. After that, I went to every major grain store in the city. I bought rice, corn, unpolished rice, flour, millet, glutinous rice, anything available, including old stock from previous years as long as it had not gone bad. I told each shopkeeper my employer was a wealthy merchant from the south who wanted to distribute porridge to refugees and beggars, a cover story that worked perfectly since many people had already fled to the capital after a deadly winter. Then I moved on to noodle shops and bun stalls, ordering every type of dry noodle, steamed bun, and manta they had, white flour, corn flour, sorghum flour, all of it. I claimed my mother had passed away, and I wanted to give food to the poor in her honor. Every shop owner was happy to take the money and promised delivery by the next afternoon. While I was busy with all of this, things at the palace were going very differently for my husband. He had not been taken to the physician at all. The Crown Prince's men had dragged him to a secret prison and questioned him, then beaten him with a rod. He went pale and whimpered in pain, but he did not cry. "Father, I believe he is faking it," the Crown Prince insisted. Back at the palace, the Emperor ordered the beating to continue, 50 strikes total, until my husband's wounds were severe. My husband stayed conscious long enough to hear them discussing charges against him. He understood then that he had to keep pretending to be a fool, or the whole family would be destroyed. He held on until he passed out. The cushion I had made him wear had helped, at least a little. Meanwhile, I was very busy. After the grain stores, I changed clothes again and went to the fabric district. I skipped the silk, useless for warmth, and my step-family shop had plenty anyway. I bought everything else: plain cloth, winter padded coats, cotton blankets, shoes. Since summer was coming, these were being sold at a discount. I paid a fabric shop owner extra to help me source more from other shops, telling him I was donating supplies for disaster relief on behalf of an elderly grandmother's birthday. Nobody questions a good lie. Then I hired some street children to run around buying snacks, roasted chestnuts, grilled skewers, sweets from every corner of the city. I sat in my cart and collected it all. After that, I disguised myself as a traveling medicine woman and walked into the largest pharmacy in the city. I laid down a stack of banknotes and bought every wound medicine they had, plus herbs for fever, stomach illness, and snake bites. Even though my modern pharmacy was stored in my space, I still could not reach most of it yet. Better to have ancient medicine ready for ancient bodies. I had no idea how my modern drugs would affect people here. Buying that much wound medicine attracted attention. Someone started following me. I used my earth ability to disappear underground and lost them in the commoners' street district. There I found food stalls selling live pigs, chickens, ducks, rabbits, and preserved meats, cured pork, sausages, cured duck, and goose. I bought it all and had it sent to one of the rented properties. I tested something. I put a live rooster into my storage space. It died instantly. The space could not keep living creatures alive, but whatever went in stayed exactly as it was when it entered. Fresher than a refrigerator. With the night still young, I sent runners to buy up all the charcoal in the city, good quality and bad. Lingnan, where we would be exiled, had cold, damp winters. I was not going to freeze. By the time I returned to the royal residence, it was dark. My mother-in-law was anxious. My husband had still not come back. I told her again what I had seen at the palace. She still could not believe anything was wrong. My young sister-in-law Pei Shirshir waved it off, saying the crown prince and my husband had always been close. My 10-year-old brother-in-law Pei Yun agreed that nobody would bother a harmless fool. I stared at them all. The entire family had absolutely no survival instincts. There was no point relying on them. Once we left the capital for exile, I would find the right moment to take charge of our survival myself. My mother-in-law patted my hand and told me not to worry. Fine. If nobody else is worried, I will not waste the energy either. I went to bed well-fed and well-prepared. Tomorrow I had to visit my step-family's home for the traditional third-day return visit, and I had a score to settle with my stepsister Su Wanarwan for what she had done on my wedding day. I woke up the next morning feeling much better. My legs were still sore from all the walking the night before. I told myself. After a warm breakfast with the family, we waited for my husband to return from the palace so he could escort me to my step-family's home, as tradition required on the third day after a wedding. By mid-morning, he still had not come back. My mother-in-law grew anxious, sending servants to check repeatedly. I did not want to wait any longer. I had things to do at my step-family's house. I told my mother-in-law I would go alone, that my family would understand. She did not want me to go unaccompanied, so she sent her younger son Pei Yun with me instead. He was only 10 but agreed without complaint, saying it was his responsibility as the only male in the family to look after everyone. Before we even left, my stepsister Su Wanarwan's personal maid came with a message. My mother said not to bother bringing gifts, just come as family. She knows the royal residence will be seized. She does not want anything that could be linked to us. I told them to put the gifts back, and we left without them. When we arrived, the family had already eaten, even though it was barely past breakfast time. They had not waited for us at all. Su Wanarwan came out with a big smile and apologized for not waiting, asking if we wanted food prepared. Her eyes flicked to Pei Yun with a flash of contempt. Your kitchen never was very good, I said pleasantly. We're fine. Her smile froze. My birth mother, Chinshur, came out slowly and asked where my husband was. I said he had been kept at the palace by the emperor and crown prince to catch up on old times. Su Wanarwan said nothing, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She already knew he was being beaten in a dungeon. My stepfather Su Yu and my stepsister's husband Chun Haojia were sitting inside. They glanced over without much interest. My 8-year-old half-brother Su pulled a face at me. Then I felt it a slow, uncomfortable stare from my stepsister's husband. He could not stop looking at me. I pretended not to notice and felt nothing but disgust. My mother looked at me with sad eyes. She knew I would be going into exile with the royal family. She could not hide her distress. Su Wanarwan noticed where my mother's attention was and moved quickly, linking arms with her and suggesting they all sit down, saying there were things my mother needed to tell me privately. Something in her tone told me this conversation was not going to be pleasant. My mother sat down and told me, coldly and indirectly, that I should not come back. A married daughter was no longer her concern. She had raised me, and that was enough. Even with borrowed memories, those words still stung. I pressed my fingernail into my thigh to keep my face looking shocked and hurt. "You are cutting me off, Mother." She confirmed it and produced a document, a formal severance of our family relationship. She wanted me to sign it and leave. Chwer dropped to her knees in protest. My stepfather silenced her sharply. Pei Yanni stood up, furious, and told me we were leaving. The Pei family would take care of me. I let him be angry on my behalf. Then I raised my head calmly. "I understand, Mother. But before I sign anything, you never gave me the full dowry that my father and grandparents prepared for me." The room went quiet. My stepsister Su Wanawan's expression flickered. She had taken those things, in her past life, and in this one. She snapped back that without her father managing everything, our family fortune would have been wasted years ago. Pei Yanni called them shameless to their faces. My mother and stepfather turned red but said nothing. They could not lay a hand on a member of the Pei royal family while the household still held its title. I kept my voice even. "I am not asking for the shops or the business. I only want what my father and grandparents set aside for me. One price, 80,000 taels of gold. Pay me and I will sign. Refuse and I will walk outside and tell everyone in the city that my own mother and stepfamily stole my dowry." I also spotted the bracelet on my mother's wrist, a Yuan family heirloom meant to pass to the daughter-in-law. I asked for that too. She removed it without a word. I slid it onto my right wrist, one bracelet on each hand. Su Wanwan gritted her teeth and said they did not have that much gold on hand. "Silver is fine. I am patient. I can wait 10 days if needed." She thought I had lost my mind from the shock of being cut off. She did not realize the person sitting in front of her was not the same Yuan Shu she remembered. After a short exchange, she agreed. 8,000 taels of gold was only a fraction of what the Pei family's disgrace would cost them if they stayed connected to us. Better to pay me off and be clean. Pei Yanni cheerfully threatened to spread rumors if they stalled. He had a talent for mischief. An hour later, over a dozen chests of gold, silver, and banknotes were placed in front of me. I counted everything carefully. It was all there. "Now bring me the severance document. I will sign." Just as I was about to sign the severance document, my stepsister Su Wanwan demanded I do it publicly, in front of the whole neighborhood. My mother agreed. Fine. I had no shame to lose. We stepped outside. A servant struck a copper gong, and a crowd gathered quickly. My mother announced to everyone that she was cutting ties with me, calling me disrespectful and beneath their family. She said from this day forward, I had nothing to do with her or the Su household. I signed the document and held it up for the crowd to see. Then I kept writing. I told the crowd I also wanted them to witness something else. My mother had failed in her duties. She had abandoned me at a farm outside the city for years, only bringing me back a month before my wedding. She had been a neglectful mother and, I declared, no longer deserved to carry my late father's name as his wife. So I divorced her on his behalf. The crowd murmured and shifted. My mother turned red with fury. I bowed my head and knocked it to the ground 3 times. I told her that despite everything, I harbored no ill will. I was leaving everything my father and grandparents had built to her as repayment for raising me. That was for the original Yuan Shu and for appearances. It worked. The crowd felt sorry for me and thought me unexpectedly filial. Chwer helped me back to the carriage, pretending I was heartbroken. Pei Yun awkwardly turned his head away and told me to go ahead and cry if I needed to. I was not crying at all. I was delighted. I had gotten my money, reclaimed the family bracelet, cut my ties cleanly, and came out looking like the wronged victim. On the way back, I handed Pei Yunni 2 gold bricks as thanks for carrying the chests, and asked to borrow his servants to visit the Pei family shops around the city, telling him I wanted to learn how things were managed before helping my mother-in-law. In truth, I was collecting all the cooked food I had ordered the previous night and scouting out which shops to empty after dark. Tomorrow we would be sent into exile. I had no time to waste. By evening I was back at the royal residence. My mother-in-law greeted me warmly, saying she had heard I once managed an estate very capably and that she had chosen the right daughter-in-law. I deflected the praise modestly. I was just a recent graduate with some medical knowledge, hardly a business expert. Not that it mattered, since the household would be gone very soon. Then I thought of my husband. He had still not returned. How much had they done to him? Just as the worry crossed my mind, a servant came running into the hall on his knees. "The prince has returned." My husband came back on a wooden board, face down and unconscious. His back was torn open and bloody. His hands hung limp at the sides, dripping blood to the floor. My mother-in-law screamed and nearly collapsed. I caught her and passed her to pay Shershur, then walked straight to my husband. I checked his breathing first. Still alive. Then I checked his hands and found something much worse. The emperor had cut his hand tendons. Even after exile, even if he survived, he would never be able to hold a weapon or lift anything heavy again. Cruel and thorough. Before anyone could process what had happened, an imperial eunuch walked in and read out the decree. The charges: military incompetence, causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and allowing subordinates to embezzle military funds. The sentence: all titles stripped, property seized, the entire household exiled to Lingnan. My mother-in-law refused to believe it. She cried out that the Pei family had always been loyal and that someone had set them up. The eunuch told her coldly that the emperor had investigated for a full year and the evidence was solid. Then he left. The imperial guards surrounded the residence and warned that resistance would be met with death. The family fell apart. My mother-in-law wept. Pei Yunyi wanted to fight his way out. Pei Shershur could not stop crying. The household physician had already fled. I grabbed Pei Yunyi by the back of his collar before he could do anything reckless. "You want to go out there and die." That stopped everyone. I told them I had wound medicine in my dowry. We needed to treat my husband's injuries first. My mother-in-law immediately called for hot water and let me take charge. It took 2 full bottles of medicine and a lot of careful work to clean and dress the wounds. Because his back was the worst, he had to lie face down. After that, my mother-in-law said she would go to her family for help. I told her plainly, the imperial decree was final. No one could change it. "Then what do we do?" she asked, exhausted. "Rest. Don't collapse before we even reach the road." Pei Yunyi nodded. He was growing up quickly under pressure. Once the servants were dismissed, I spoke to the family privately. "Tomorrow they will search everything. Don't carry obvious valuables. So your bank notes into the soles of old shoes. 1 note per shoe. Any more, and they might find them." Their eyes lit up. Even Pei Shershur, who usually just wanted to look pretty and marry well, nodded seriously. I also told them to prepare plain steamed buns. Whatever food the guards provided on the road would be barely edible. Then I volunteered to watch over my husband through the night. I had medical knowledge. My grandmother in this world had apparently been a palace physician, so no one questioned it. I settled in beside him and got to work. After everyone left, I placed both bracelets on my left wrist together, the one for my mother-in-law and the one I had taken back from my birth mother. The moment I did, a burning heat spread up my arm. A new space opened before me. 10 acres of loose, fertile soil. A spring on one side with thin white mist rising from it. A small thatched cottage nearby with a book on the table outside, titled Shenong Jing, an ancient herbal text. I opened it, but found only medicine names with no detailed instructions. I set it aside for later. I cupped the spring water and drank. It was cool and sweet. Within seconds, my aching knees and sore body stopped hurting. Immediately, I brought a bowl of it back out and dripped some into my husband's mouth. He had been sweating from pain, but his brow relaxed almost instantly. I used a cotton swab soaked in the spring water to clean his wounds. Small cuts closed up right away. Deeper wounds looked like they were days old rather than fresh. I pushed his injured hands into a full bowl of the water and soaked them. The tendons were still damaged. The water was not miraculous enough to fully restore a serious injury that quickly. But it helped. And honestly, slow healing was better. Too fast a recovery would attract dangerous suspicion. I also discovered that having both spaces active together extended my time limit inside from 2 hours to 4. Then something unexpected happened. My storage space upgraded. I could now reach further inside the pharmacy than before. Based on this, I worked out a pattern. The more the herb field space grew, the more of my clinic I could access. Even my wood ability felt slightly stronger. To be safe, I also gave my husband an injection of antibiotics from the clinic supplies. The medicines in my space replenished automatically on a timer, so I began storing them in the warehouse by category whenever they refreshed. Looking at the 10 acres of empty soil, I felt a strong urge to start planting. Vegetables first, then medicinal herbs from the Shinongjing. I wanted to see what would grow. My background and the original Yuan shoes were surprisingly similar. Her grandmother had been a palace physician and had taught her to identify herbs. My own grandfather had run a traditional medicine clinic back in my world. I had studied medicine after university until a false accusation destroyed my grandfather's reputation and broke him. He died within half a year. I gave up medicine and became a food streamer instead, though my best friend eventually convinced me to stay connected to it through our clinic. I hoped she was doing well. Chuer came in with snacks, worried I had not eaten properly. After she set them down, I took her hand and told her the truth. The household was going to be seized, and we would be exiled. She did not have to come. She dropped to her knees immediately. I gave her back her own contract and 1,000 taels of silver. I told her to leave the city tonight, live her own life, and wait for me to return someday. She cried and knocked her head to the floor 3 times. After she left, I went to the study where my mother-in-law had gathered the family. They had hidden their valuables in their shoes, as I had suggested. I told them to stay calm tomorrow. Then I asked her what she planned to do about the household servants. My mother-in-law decided to free the household servants by returning their contracts. But Pei Shirsher pointed out that the guards who had surrendered already knew about the secret passages. No one could easily leave anyway. Pei Yani then revealed that his father and brother had secretly left him 20 trained fighters before their campaign, on top of the 30 my mother-in-law knew about. 50 total. He suggested we fight our way out. I stopped that idea immediately. 50 fighters against the Imperial Army in the middle of the capital? We would be cut down before reaching the city gates. Better to stay quiet now and wait for a safer moment. The family agreed. The fighters would travel with us in secret. I reminded them that loyal soldiers needed to be paid. Pei Yunny understood and arranged to move some valuables out through a hidden passage before dawn. The servants were given their freedom papers and fed a proper final meal. No point leaving good food behind for the people who would be seizing everything tomorrow. My mother-in-law checked on my husband, saw he had no fever, and finally relaxed a little. I sent everyone to bed, telling them tomorrow would be a hard journey. Then I slipped out the window. My wood ability had grown stronger. Moving underground now felt fast, almost as quick as a galloping horse. I surfaced in the Imperial Garden and made my way straight to the royal treasury. The floor tiles were expensive, but I moved them aside easily and climbed up through the soil. What I saw inside took my breath away. Gold, jewels, silks, chests stacked to the ceiling. I sent my vine-like ability spreading through the room and swept everything into my storage space in under 15 minutes. Then I took the marble floor tiles and the decorative glass lanterns on the walls for good measure. From there I moved through empty palace halls and used bedchambers, side halls, clearing out furniture, curtains, and anything else that could be quietly removed. Then I reached the Emperor's private quarters. Empty. Perfect. The golden bed alone was obscene. I put it straight into my space. I took everything that could be moved silently and left the floor tiles because the color was ugly. His private treasury was even richer than the national one. This was where he kept funds for secret operations and people who worked in the shadows. No wonder everyone wants to be emperor. After that, I went to the imperial study. Somewhere in there had to be evidence, documents, letters, records that could prove the Pei family's innocence. I did not have time to sort through it all, so I swept everything in. Someday, if a decent ruler ever came to power, I would hand it all over and clear the family's name. I stopped in a quiet corner to eat a chicken leg for my supplies, then kept going. On my way past one of the side halls, I heard familiar sounds through a paper window. I peeked and saw one of the emperor's favorite consorts with a palace guard. Apparently, the emperor's household had its own secrets. Not my business. But I did take a detour to empty her chambers while she was otherwise occupied. Then I visited the Empress Dowager's quarters. She had burned calming incense and was sleeping deeply, but her night attendants were still awake. I used my ability to push thin vines up through the floor tiles and deliver a quick sedative injection to each of them. They dropped silently. I cleared out the Empress Dowager's room completely, everything except the blanket she was sleeping under. Even the chamber pot. Then I thought of one more stop. The armory. The Imperial weapons storage would have the finest quality weapons available. I grinned and headed straight for it. The weapons vault was impressive. Swords, spears, shields, whips, bows, crossbows, all sorted neatly by type with sealed design blueprints beside them. One item stopped me cold. A prototype firearm. Unfinished and clearly failed, but the concept was there. I am taking this. Someone might figure it out eventually. I moved on to the Empress's chambers. She and the Emperor were both dead asleep, too exhausted to notice me strip the room clean. I briefly considered killing the Emperor while I had the chance. Then I talked myself out of it. His sudden death would point directly at the Pei family, and the Crown Prince would use it as an excuse to have us all executed. Besides, a power vacuum in the capital would invite neighboring kingdoms to invade. Too many innocent people would suffer. I will leave you alive. Consider the palace contents your ransom. I took the Empress's elaborate bed frame and cleared out her furniture, then headed to the imperial kitchen. Pots, pans, charcoal, live chickens, ducks, and geese. I put the animals into my farming space and discovered it could keep living creatures alive, unlike my warehouse space. The food smelled wonderful. I took everything. Then straight to the Imperial Physician's Hall. The medicinal smell hit me as soon as I entered and reminded me of my grandfather's clinic back home. Every shelf was stocked with premium herbs, worth every second of the detour. On the way out, I passed the Imperial prison. I caused a commotion, shouting that prisoners were escaping, which drew most of the guards away. While they scrambled, I slipped back to the Imperial garden, dug up the lotus flowers, caught all the decorative fish, and uprooted the wisteria vine, the grape trellis, and every fruit tree I wanted, not leaving anything nice for the Emperor. The Emperor woke up to the prison alarm, stood up, and immediately realized he was lying on bare floor in an empty room. The Empress screamed. He ran to his study, opened the door, saw nothing but empty shelves, closed it, opened it again, and just stood there. I was already gone. On the way out of the palace, I passed the throne hall. The dragon throne went into my space too. So did the ceremonial fans behind it. Leaving the palace, I passed the homes of several corrupt officials and helped myself to their valuables as well. Things I did not want: a consort's undergarments, the Empress Dowager's chamber pot, I simply dropped in the street. Then I remembered one more place: the Imperial tomb. I found a quiet corner and tunneled down. The tomb was grand and silent. I lit candles at all four corners to see by, then activated my ability and sent vines sweeping through the space. Mechanisms clicked and clattered. Treasure spilled everywhere. I stood over the ancestors' coffins and pressed my palms together respectfully. Sorry to intrude, but you produced Emperor Gaoxian, so some of this is your fault. In the end, I held back. Stripping the tomb completely would leave the Emperor with nothing, and a desperate, penniless emperor would squeeze the common people even harder through taxes. The ancient founders had also been decent rulers. Their descendants' failures were not entirely their doing. I took only what was openly displayed and left the burial goods untouched. Last stop, the Crown Prince's residence. His chambers smelled of wine. He and the Crown Princess were passed out on the bed. Several other women were asleep on the floor. I got to work. After emptying the Crown Prince's treasury, I went back to his bedroom, picked up a rolling pin I had grabbed from the imperial kitchen, and hit him with it. Not on the head, I did not want to kill him, but his face got several good punches from my fist. That is for what you did to my husband. Then I finished clearing out his residence and kept moving. I still had the Pei family shops and my stepfamily's property to deal with before dawn. Back at the palace, the emperor had discovered the empty rooms. He walked to the national treasury, saw bare floors with muddy boot prints, and coughed up blood. He collapsed. His attendants ran for the physicians, only to be told the entire medical hall had been cleared out too. The whole palace was in chaos. And it was not just the palace. Corrupt officials and wealthy merchants across the city had also been robbed overnight. I had made sure to label everything carefully in my space so nothing got mixed up. I had also deliberately left some stolen palace items in the homes of certain officials, planting false evidence for the emperor to find later. Let them chase each other. When I returned to the royal residence around 3:30 in the morning, I found that Pei Yunyi had already sent all the servants out through the hidden passage with silver to start new lives. The building was empty except for the imperial guards posted outside, who had not entered. Perfect timing. I swept through the residence and took every plant and flower I wanted, then collapsed into bed. A few hours later, my mother-in-law's screaming woke me up. "We've been robbed." I put on my most shocked expression and said it was outrageous that someone would dare do this to us. My mother-in-law burst out laughing. She said she was glad, because at least the emperor would not get it. We ate the leftover rice and chicken and steamed buns that the thief had apparently considered beneath taking, and prepared to leave. At the palace, the emperor had woken up to complete devastation. The crown prince arrived late, face swollen and bruised, head down. The emperor stared at him and did not ask questions. An official came in with news. Stolen palace goods had been found in the homes of several ministers. The emperor's eyes went cold. With the treasury empty and no clear suspect, someone had to suffer. Those ministers would do. My stepfamily was also in crisis. Their shops had been emptied, their homes stripped, even the large apricot tree in the courtyard had been dug up and taken. They were reporting it to the authorities. Back at the royal residence, we had just set down our chopsticks when the confiscation officers arrived. The man in charge was round-bellied and sharp-eyed. He had planned to skim valuables off the top during the seizure, but he had been delayed by his own home being robbed that morning. Before he could say anything, I stood up and cried out dramatically that we needed to report a theft. The entire residence had been stripped overnight. He went pale. He rushed to the treasury room and found it spotless. Even the floor tiles were gone. He turned around and drew his sword at me. "Did you hide everything? Tell me where it is." My mother-in-law stepped in front of me and faced the officer firmly. She pointed out that we were surrounded by imperial guards. How could a few women have moved an entire residence full of valuables? She suggested maybe the guards themselves had let thieves in and were now trying to blame us. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She was trying to protect us. The officer gritted his teeth, searched the entire residence again, found nothing, and left to report to the authorities. We waited calmly. The exile order stood regardless. The emperor was not going to change his mind over a robbery. Word reached the palace that the Pei residence had also been emptied. The emperor actually felt a strange satisfaction hearing that, though mostly he was furious about everything else. He waved his hand and told his people to just send us away. We were an eyesore. Within the hour, the officer returned with a eunuch named Sue and 2 palace matrons. They herded us behind a screen and searched us thoroughly, stripped us of our fine clothes and made us wear old yellowed garments from the servant quarters. They checked every seam and every shoe. The banknotes hidden in our shoe soles were about to be found. While the matrons were distracted checking items on the table, I used my ability to push thin vines through the floor cracks and quietly pull the shoe sole inserts into my storage space. The matrons found nothing. Outside, the officers spotted Pei Shishi's bundle and demanded it be searched. When she said it was just steamed buns for the road, he had his men break every single one open looking for hidden silver. They found nothing, but handled the buns with dirty hands in the process. We left them behind. With eunuch Su watching, we pushed my husband in a wheelchair toward the exile convoy. 50 people total would be making this journey, guarded by 33 officers. Everyone else in the convoy carried bundles of belongings. The Pei family had only one set of spare clothes each. Before Su left, I spoke up. My husband was unconscious and injured. Our group of women could not carry him the whole way to Lingnan. I asked if we could have a cart. The officer laughed at us.
Anuk suhestita.
I appealed to the emperor's reputation. Surely the man who had called my husband a son would not want people to see his injured, unconscious body dragged through the dirt. If the journey stalled because we could not move him, it would reflect poorly on the emperor's generosity. Su reached into his own pocket, found a small cart barely big enough for my husband to lie on, and called it imperial kindness. We thanked him through gritted teeth and set off. Some distance from the city gates, I heard hoofbeats. A cart pulled up and Chwer jumped down. She pressed silver into the guard's hand, whispered something, and was given a quarter hour. She ran to me carrying bundles and baskets. I smiled. I had hoped she might do exactly this. She said it was nothing valuable, just things I might need on the road. Mostly food. Smart girl. Smarter than I had expected. Chwer's bundles held meat pies, roasted flour, steamed buns, cured pork and sausage, rice, flour, boiled eggs, thin blankets, cloth shoes, and water pouches. She apologized that she did not know our shoe sizes and had bought them a little large. My mother-in-law and the 2 younger siblings were moved to tears. We accepted everything gratefully and sent her off. The other exiles grumbled with jealousy. The lead guard cracked his whip and told them their own families were welcome to bring them gold if they wanted. We laid 2 blankets under my husband on the cart and covered him with a third. The others took turns pushing the cart and carrying the bundles, insisting I rest. They said they were glad to have me, that I was their anchor. I smiled but said nothing dramatic. The truth was simpler. I had married into this family, and the emperor would never grant a divorce. Someone was probably watching us right now on his orders. Running before we left the capital would be reckless. I needed to wait for the right moment further down the road. We walked for 8 hours under the sun before the guards allowed a rest. By then, everyone was exhausted and starving. Pei Shir and Pei Yunny came to me first, asking politely if they could have some food. I handed everything around, giving my mother-in-law the first share out of basic respect for her age. My husband was still unconscious. I gave him a little spring water from my space and left him to rest. While we ate, I noticed a group nearby watching us, the Pei family's maternal relatives, the Ji household. My mother-in-law's stepmother, Lady Lu, was among them. She had always taken advantage of my mother-in-law's gentle nature and had clearly been living well off the Pei family's reputation for years. Now that the Pei family had fallen, Ji family members had been swept up in the exile too. They had accepted bribes under the Pei family's cover for years. Lady Lu looked at our food and cart with greedy eyes. She sent her daughter-in-law Wang Shi and her grandson Ji Hao marching over to demand meat pies for the elders and to claim the cart for Lady Lu's sore feet. Ji Hao had resented my husband since childhood, always being compared to him and falling short. Pei Yanni and Pei Shir lit up when they saw their relatives approaching, thinking they had come to check on them. Wang Shi crossed her arms and scolded them for eating without sending food to their grandmother first. I looked at them calmly and said nothing yet. So, this is what we are dealing with on the road. Wang Shi scolded Pei Shir and Pei Yanni for eating without sending food to their grandmother first. She blamed the entire Ji family's exile on the Pei family and demanded both the food and the cart. While she was talking, I noticed Ji Hao quietly pressing down on my husband's wounds, trying to cause enough pain to wake him up and force him off the cart. My husband's brow creased in pain. I shouted at him. He jumped back and played innocent, saying he was just trying to wake his cousin, so the cart could be given to their grandmother. My mother-in-law tried to reason with them gently. Wang Shi cut her off and said my husband had suffered nothing but minor injuries. When Ji Hao moved toward my husband again, I picked up a rock from the ground. Touch him, and I will use this. I meant it. Ji Hao backed off, rubbing his arm where I had already hit him. Wang Shi charged at me. Pei Shir stuck out her foot, Wang Shi went down face first and lost a front tooth. My mother-in-law rushed to help her up, and Wang Shi slapped her across the face in return. Pei Shi immediately slapped Wang Shi back. Ji Hao lunged at Pei Shi. Pei Yunyi threw himself in the way, with arms spread wide. I hit Ji Hao again with the rock and added a loud slap, then accused him in front of everyone of grabbing my hand. He denied it furiously. I did not give him time to explain. I turned to the surrounding exiles and announced loudly that my mother-in-law had been about to offer them food, but instead they had tried to steal my injured husband's cart. I asked the crowd whether they had come to help or to take. Everyone watched. The whispers were not kind to the Ji family. A guard walked over with his whip and asked Wang Shi flatly whether she planned to carry the injured man herself if she took the cart. She went quiet and left with Ji Hao. My mother-in-law was shaken. She could not understand how people who had accepted so much from the Pei family over the years could turn so quickly. I said nothing. I already knew what the Ji family was. What mattered now was keeping my mother-in-law from becoming a pushover on this road. I quietly added spring water from my space to everyone's water pouches. It eased fatigue. I did not want this group falling apart on the first day. Behind me, I did not notice that my husband's fingers had moved slightly. Back in the capital, the emperor was trying to calm himself down enough to hold court. Some of the elderly ministers had been waiting so long outside the throne hall that they had fainted from hunger. He called for his robes. Then someone gently reminded him his throne was missing. Back in the capital, the emperor walked into the throne hall to find his dragon throne gone. He stood on the empty platform staring at nothing while his ministers bowed and begged him to calm down. He ordered the city magistrate and the chief justice to investigate. He also made it clear that the palace robbery was not to be discussed publicly, admitting that thieves had emptied the imperial treasury under the emperor's nose would shake public confidence. The official story was that a small amount of items had been taken by opportunistic thieves. Some ministers were immediately detained, however. Evidence of their corruption had been found, along with stolen palace goods planted in their homes. Someone had to be punished, and they were the convenient choice. Meanwhile, Su Wanwan and her husband had their own problems. The Qin family home had also been robbed, including her dowry, and palace goods had mysteriously appeared on their property. They came to the Su household for help, only to find it had been stripped too. They were all scrambling. Su Wanwan tried to make sense of it. In her memory of her past life, none of this had happened. She sold some jewelry she had hidden away and took over managing the Chun household finances, only to find the silver gone almost immediately. Her husband soothed her with sweet words and told her he believed in her abilities. She did not yet realize how difficult the job she had just accepted actually was. Back on the road, our convoy finally reached a rest station for the night. My mother-in-law suggested she and the children sleep outside to save money. The shared sleeping room cost 5 copper coins per person, 25 total for the 5 of us, or 30 for a private room with 1 extra coin for hot water. I paid for the private room without discussion. I had spent years in school dormitories sleeping next to people who snored and ground their teeth. I had a storage space and supernatural abilities. There was absolutely no reason for me to suffer a shared room. Besides, my husband needed proper rest to recover, and everyone else needed to be strong enough to walk tomorrow. I tipped the innkeeper's boy a little extra, and he carefully carried my husband up the stairs. Pei Yunyi backed me up, telling his mother that if they exhausted themselves trying to save a few coins, they would only slow everyone down the next day.
We settled in.
Pei Shi asked quietly how the Ji family had managed to hide their money when we had been searched so thoroughly. She and her mother had their shoe inserts taken, their clothes checked seam by seam. I leaned over and whispered in her ear. Her face went bright red. I had only learned the method myself from overhearing other exiles talking on the road. People hid small pieces of silver wrapped in oiled paper inside their bodies, the one place even the most thorough search does not reach. They also bribed the searchers beforehand to look away. Pei Shi stared at me speechlessly. After sending Pei Shi and Pei Yunyi to fetch hot water, I went to borrow the inn's kitchen to heat up our meat pies and prepare porridge. My mother-in-law asked if we should call a doctor for my husband. I told her the roadside inn's physician would probably be less capable than me, and that I had hidden wound medicine in the flour bags. She was relieved and grateful.
Good.
Now, let me eat first. While I was in the kitchen, Jihao intercepted the two siblings in the hallway carrying a whole steamed chicken, warm, fragrant, clearly expensive. He invited them in with a smile, pretending the morning's argument was behind them. Pei Sure and Pei Yunny hesitated, then followed. They were hungry, and they quietly hoped to bring back a chicken leg or wing to put in porridge for their injured brother. Inside, Lady Lu stared at them coldly. Jihao set the chicken down and announced loudly that since their poor cousins obviously could not afford good food, he would charitably cut off the chicken backside, the part nobody wanted, and let them take it for the injured prince. The room laughed. Pei Yunny exploded. Pei Sure went red and white and red again, fists clenched. I walked in just then and put my hand on Pei Yunny's head to stop him. "How generous," I said pleasantly. "Keep the backside for yourselves. I hear it is very good for brain development. We would prefer a leg. A wing would also do." The room went silent. Then someone slammed the door in our faces. I walked the two of them back down the hallway. They were blinking hard, trying not to cry. I told them to go back to the room and wait. The meat pies would be ready soon. They went in quietly. My mother-in-law saw their faces immediately and asked what happened. Pei Yunny told her plainly. My mother-in-law looked uncomfortable. After a pause, she said the Ji family had many people and limited money, and we should not add to their trouble. She would figure something out. I walked in with the food, keeping my expression neutral. She still felt guilty for the Ji family being dragged into exile alongside us. That guilt was going to be a problem. The Ji family had benefited from the Pei family status for years. They knew what they were getting into. But explaining that to my mother-in-law right now would not work. Instead, I said the opposite. I agreed with her sweetly. The Ji elders were just upset, and if we were patient and kind, they would surely come around. My mother-in-law nodded, feeling better. Pei Yunny stared at me. My real plan was simple. I would let the Ji family show their true nature a little more before I left this convoy. The faster my mother-in-law saw it clearly for herself, the better chance this family had of surviving without me. After dinner, Pei Yunny volunteered to wash his brother down before cleaning himself up. My mother-in-law and Pei Sure fell asleep almost immediately from exhaustion. Pei Yunny lay on the floor, wrapped himself in half a blanket, and was out in seconds. I had no intention of sleeping on the floor. I shifted my husband over and lay down beside him on the narrow bed. The moment I pulled the blanket, I found myself looking straight into a pair of deep, clear eyes. He was awake. I pushed down the sudden flutter in my chest and spoke normally. "You are up. Where does it hurt? Are you hungry?" His voice came out hoarse and weak. He had not eaten in 2 days. I sat him up carefully, fetched the warm porridge and meat pie I had saved for him, and fed him since his hands were too damaged to hold anything. He thanked me quietly after each mouthful, his expression complicated. I noticed something different about his eyes. They were not the vacant, confused eyes of the fool prince. They were focused, present, thinking. He was no longer acting foolish, but he was smart enough to know that if the emperor found out he had recovered his mind, he would never survive the journey to Lingnan. So he had decided to keep pretending. I said nothing about it. After he finished eating, I picked up the medicine and told him to take his clothes off so I could treat his wounds. He automatically reached for his belt, then stopped. His face went pale. His hands. He could not use them properly anymore. I told him not to worry and reached over to help. As I worked at his belt, his expression went through several changes. I happened to tilt my head, and he caught a glimpse of the marks still visible on my collarbone from our wedding night. His ears went red. Then his whole face. I teased him lightly, saying I was just going to look at the wounds. Nothing to be embarrassed about. He muttered that he was not embarrassed. Then he reminded himself he was a prince. I flicked his forehead. "You are in exile now. Stop calling yourself that in front of people, or someone is going to hit you for it." My husband nodded obediently. I switched out the wound powder for Yunnan Baiyao for my space, far more effective than anything available in this era. Some of the wounds had started showing signs of infection from being covered all day. I cleaned them with spring water, which eased the burning pain. Then I told him the larger wounds needed stitching. He looked alarmed. I told him adults were talking and children should not worry, then popped 2 ibuprofen into his mouth before he could argue and made him drink water. He swallowed without protest. I realized he had simply decided to trust me, and that felt unexpectedly significant. I gave him a local anesthetic around the worst wounds before stitching, used sterile bandages from my storage, and wrapped everything with gauze. The back wounds were too spread out to stitch, so I applied powder and clean dressings instead. Wrapping the bandages required me to reach around him, which kept bringing back specific memories from our wedding night in far too much detail. I cleared my throat and announced I was done and going to sleep. He watched me with warm eyes and said I had worked hard. I lay down on the outer edge of the bed, pulled the blanket over us both, and told him to be quiet. Little kittens sleep silently. He looked amused but said nothing. After I fell asleep, he lay awake for a while. The painkillers had dulled the worst of it, but his head still throbbed. He quietly debated whether to keep pretending to be a fool. Protecting his family meant staying hidden until he had a real way to defend them. He gently rested his arm across me and eventually drifted off. In the middle of the night, my mother-in-law woke up, saw his hand lightly resting on my waist, and smiled to herself. The next morning I woke at 6, unable to sleep further. Everyone else was still dead to the world. I slipped out and came back carrying a whole stewed chicken, with the innkeeper's boys following behind with steamed buns and porridge. Good fortune, we eat chicken this morning. Pei Shirshir and Pei Yunny's eyes went red when they saw it, remembering the chicken backside from last night. They said we should eat it and they would just have buns and porridge. I told them to stop being silly. We were one family, and we ate together. My husband woke up while we were talking, head aching, hungry, and decided quietly to keep pretending to be a fool until he could actually protect everyone. My mother-in-law gave me the largest chicken leg. The siblings agreed to give me the other one too. I told them I actually preferred the wings and gave the legs back. The whole family was moved by this small gesture and spent several minutes saying I was the most wonderful daughter-in-law imaginable. I just wanted to eat my wings before the guards started shouting at us to move. We settled the chicken leg debate by simply tearing it apart and sharing. Then the guards' whistle blew, and we moved out. I pressed my husband back down when he tried to get up. His wounds were nowhere near healed. My mother-in-law agreed, and we had the innkeeper's boy carry him downstairs on his back while my husband played at being weak. The Ji family saw him awake and immediately tried to claim the cart again. Before Wang Shi could finish her sentence, I cut in sweetly and asked the family elders if they could lend us money for wound medicine instead, just 10 or 20 taels, to be repaid once we reached Lingnan. My mother-in-law caught on quickly and added her voice to the request. She genuinely needed the help. The Ji family exploded. Wang Shi shouted that they had nothing, that we had ruined them, that we had no shame asking. They walked away fast before my mother-in-law could kneel and beg. They were too afraid of the optics. I helped her up and said we would manage by gathering herbs on the road. That settled the cart matter too, since the Ji family could hardly keep demanding it after refusing to help us. We set off again. I pushed the cart, my mother-in-law, and the 2 younger siblings carried everything else. I had added spring water to everyone's foot soak and drinking water the night before, so despite their tiredness, nobody's legs had given out. The guards kept up their threats, occasionally whipping stragglers to keep everyone moving. I noticed Pei Shirshir had gone pale and was walking strangely. When I thought back to how she had looked coming out of the outhouse that morning, I understood immediately. Her monthly had arrived at the worst possible time. She had not been particularly warm to me since I joined the family, but she had never caused trouble either. That was enough. I was not going to watch her suffer when I could help. I swapped my pack onto my own back and told her to push the cart instead. She tried to refuse. I told her that as her eldest sister-in-law, she had to listen to me, and that was that. She teared up thanking me. My husband lay on the cart watching with eyes half closed, pretending to be unaware. But I could tell from the set of his face that he was very aware indeed. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Su Wanwan sipped her plum juice in the cool shade and laughed, imagining me suffering under the blazing sun on the exile road. She had no idea I was doing perfectly fine. At noon, the guards allowed arrest. I handed out eggs, steamed buns, and water, plain enough not to attract attention, though the water was laced with spring water from my space. I peeled an egg and held it out to my husband. He swallowed it in one bite and nearly choked.
Slow down, I sighed.
Nobody is taking it from you. He drank water to wash it down, then ate the rest of his food at a dignified pace. My mother-in-law and the siblings exchanged amused glances. The G family's lunch, from what we could see, was considerably less cheerful. At lunch, I noticed the G family dynamics were ugly. Lady Lu and her favored grandchildren ate meat buns while the women of the elder branch got nothing but cold steamed buns. When the eldest son secretly saved a bun for his wife and daughters, Ji Hao snatched it from the girls' hands and ate it himself, laughing in their faces. My mother-in-law watched from a distance, with sad eyes. The eldest daughter-in-law glared back at her as if the whole situation were her fault. I said nothing and noted everything. When Pei Shishir went to fill the water pouches at a stream, I went with her. While she used the bushes nearby, I crouched by the water pretending to fill a flask and quietly transferred spring water into the containers instead. Just then I caught a reflection in the water, a hand reaching toward my face.
Yihao.
I stepped aside instantly. He nearly stumbled forward. I used my wit ability to quietly loosen the soil under his feet. He pitched face first into the stream, hit his head on a rock, and sat there sputtering and soaked. "Cousin, why are you bathing in this cold water?" I called out cheerfully as Pei Shishir came back. Then I pulled her away before she could ask questions. Ji Hao dragged himself out in a fury, dripping wet and saying nothing. Later that afternoon, 2 more Ji family members arrived under guard. Ji Heng and Ji Xiaoying, the second branch's eldest son and youngest daughter. The family reunion was tearful, with Lady Lu loudly blaming the Pei family for all their suffering, making sure we heard every word. My husband lay on his cart with a blank expression. I noticed his hand quietly grip and release the blanket beneath him. Pei Shishir's eyes filled with tears. My mother-in-law wiped hers away in silence. That night we could not reach the next inn and slept outdoors in the mountains. The Ji family had no blankets and set their sights on ours. Ji Heng made a show of worrying about his grandmother being cold. Ji Xiaoying volunteered and marched straight over to pull the blanket off my husband. Pei Yunyi grabbed the other end. "Cousin, men and women do not touch without reason, unless you want to be my brother's concubine." Ji Xiaoying had once asked to become my husband's concubine before his accident, only to be refused based on the family rule against taking concubines. She flushed red and denied everything. Before she could state her real reason for being there, I grabbed her hand warmly. Yun must have misunderstood. She clearly came to give us silver for wound medicine. How thoughtful. We are truly family. I did not. "Oh, you already bought the medicine." "Even better. Thank you so much." "I did not bring medicine either." "Then food to help him recover?" "You are so kind." Wang Shi rushed over and snapped that there was no food to be found on this road. I looked between them with my most grateful expression and waited. The other exiles nearby were watching with undisguised interest. Ji Xiaoying stood there trapped. She had come to take something, and now in front of an audience, she could neither deny it nor escape, without looking exactly as selfish as she was. Ji Xiaoying recovered quickly and claimed she had only come to check on her cousin. Wang Shi, however, did not leave. She grabbed our blanket and refused to let go, announcing she was borrowing it for Lady Lu and would return it in the morning. Everyone knew it would never come back. My mother-in-law wanted to offer her own half-blanket, but she stopped herself. Everything we had came from me, and she would not give it away without asking. I said calmly that we could lend the blanket. Wang Shi's face lit up. Then I added my condition. I would lend the blanket if Lady Lu would lend me 10 taels of silver for my husband's medicine. And if anyone in the Ji family agreed, I would give them the blanket outright. No return needed. Wang Shi's face changed immediately. No money, then no blanket. I yanked it back and announced to the surrounding exiles that the Ji family had tried to take our only blanket while refusing to help pay for medicine for an injured man. Wang Shi and Ji Xiaoying slunk back to their group to muttering and stares. My mother-in-law apologized to me for being helpless. I decided it was time to speak plainly. I told her that she had said the Ji family were loyal and caring people, but here we were, with my husband injured and barely alive, and they had not offered a single coin or kind word. Pei Shi and Pei Yunyi both backed me up loudly. My mother-in-law went quiet. She was not ready to fully accept it yet, but the seed was planted. The next day, we passed a small town, and I asked the guards for permission to buy supplies. They gave us 1 hour. My mother-in-law needed to see wound medicine purchased through normal means. I could not explain food and medicine appearing from nowhere forever. In the marketplace, Wang Shi spotted me and sneered that I probably could not afford anything. "You're absolutely right," I agreed pleasantly. She went into the ironware shop feeling smug. I picked up a cooking pot, told the shop owner my aunt would be paying, and added a cleaver and some bowls to the order. The shopkeeper's wife, happy to make a sale, agreed immediately. I slipped away to add a container of salt and wound medicine from my storage space into my basket, then rejoined the others. When Wang Shi went to pay for her own items, she learned what had happened. She was furious, denied everything, and refused to pay. The shopkeeper did not care about family disputes. She ended up paying anyway, or leaving empty-handed. Back at camp, my mother-in-law saw the pot, cleaver, and medicine and asked worriedly how much silver was left. I told her cheerfully that Lady Lu had kindly had Wang Shi buy these things for us as a gift. I said it loud enough for the Ji family to hear. Wang Shi stormed over demanding the items back, calling me shameless. I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes and said she had told me herself that she would pay after I spent my money on medicine. How could the shopkeeper have let me take things otherwise? "I never said that. You did. Otherwise, why would the shopkeeper have agreed?" I had never actually pulled this kind of trick before, but I had to admit, it felt wonderful. Lady Lu stomped over with her walking stick and demanded the cooking pot and knife back. Wang Shi snatched everything without hesitation. My mother-in-law stood there with the look of someone who had just been slapped. She had just been praising the Ji family to her children moments before. That was exactly what I had planned. I needed her to see clearly, and sometimes a sharp lesson lands better than 100 warnings. I pretended to be upset and said loudly that we had treated the Ji family as our own, only to be played for fools. Lady Lu fired back with the usual accusations about the Pei family killing innocent soldiers, then walked away. I turned to comfort my mother-in-law and told her we still had some silver and would buy our own things. My husband watched me leave, looking thoughtful beneath his blank expression. He had figured out what I was doing. He had always found the Ji family insufferable. He just had never forced his mother to see it. While the others processed what had happened, I slipped away to a quiet spot, ducked into my storage space, rinsed off, and ate half a roasted chicken. I came back feeling completely restored. When I rejoined the group with a new pot and supplies in my basket, Ji Xiaoying immediately complained loudly that I had kept everyone waiting and was wasting the guards' time. The guards reached for their whips. I spoke before anyone could act, pointing out that the guards had not said anything yet, and asking Ji Xiaoying whether she thought she was qualified to give orders on their behalf. The whip cracked near Ji Xiaoying's feet instead. "Mind your own business," the guard snapped at her. I thanked them warmly and called them the most reasonable officials I had ever encountered. The guard told me to stop flattering him, but he let it go. Wang Shi spat on the ground and called me a fox spirit. The siblings immediately took my basket and helped distribute the items. Pei Shi said I seemed to know everything. I told her I had simply picked things up from years of living on the farm estate, then told everyone to start walking. My husband tried to get up off the cart. I pushed him back down. "Heel first. Be good." He obeyed. As we walked, one of the Ji family members asked the guard how long it would take to reach Lingnan. 4 or 5 months if nothing goes wrong, the guard said. Up to a year or more if we hit blocked roads. The entire convoy went quiet. The guard added his reminder. Anyone who ran would be killed, and any family members left behind would be killed alongside them. Pei Yanni looked up at his mother with uncertain eyes. Is Lingnan really that far? What kind of place is it? My mother-in-law admitted she knew nothing about Lingnan. Pei Shishir had heard frightening stories from storytellers, deep forests, uncivilized villages, people eating raw meat. I told them it was not that dramatic. I said I had once met someone on the farm estate who came from there. The environment was rough and the land poor, but it had mountains and water. You would not starve. That settled everyone down considerably. The days settled into a rhythm. We walked, shared the load, and kept each other company. When the guards called a halt for the night and handed out cold, hard steamed buns, I accepted mine with a genuine thank you. Small gestures matter on a long road. While Pei Yanni and Pei Shishir collected firewood, I gathered a handful of mugwort, a wild herb that grows along roadsides and is perfectly edible. My mother-in-law had never heard of eating it. I explained it simply, and she paid close attention. After a few difficult days of crying quietly, she had started asking me practical questions about survival. I was glad to teach her. I blanched the mugwort, chopped it fine, and mixed it with flour to make a dough. For the filling I used a small piece of cured pork I had on hand and some wild garlic I had picked along the way. I showed my mother-in-law how to wrap the dumplings and left her to it while I made porridge, dropping the hard government-issued buns into the pot with cornmeal and water. The buns softened and made the porridge thicker and more filling. When the dumplings came out of the steamer, the smell of pork and wild garlic drifted across the whole camp. People turned their heads and made envious comments. I set aside 4 dumplings and had Pei Yanni come with me to deliver them to the lead guard. I told him we had caused a small delay that day and wanted to make it up to them. The guard hesitated, then accepted. His colleague bit into one immediately and could not hide how good it was. In return, the guard handed me a packet of insect-repelling powder, a fair trade, and more useful than anything I could have asked for. On the way back, Pei Yanni said quietly that bribing the guards was pointless. I covered his mouth. It is not bribing. It is goodwill. We are not trying to make them like us. We just need them not to look for reasons to make our lives harder. There is a difference. He nodded slowly, filing it away. The Ji family watched and sneered that we had traded good food for a cheap packet of powder. I turned to Ji Xiaoying pleasantly. Do you think the guard's insect powder is fake? After the Ji family incident, I sent Pei Yanni back with 2 more dumplings for the guard, partly as genuine thanks for the insect powder, partly because giving extra in front of the Ji family was satisfying. The guards accepted without a word. The Ji family stared and said nothing, not daring to complain after Wang Shi had already been whipped. We ate well that evening, porridge and hot dumplings. Then I took the first watch shift while the others slept. When I noticed my husband limping away toward a secluded spot, I called after him. He said he needed to relieve himself and went alone. After a long time, he still had not returned. I went looking and found him shuffling back slowly, looking miserable. His wound dressings were soaked with blood. He had torn open the injury trying to manage his trousers on his own with damaged hands. I scolded him all the way back to the cart. As a medical person, nothing frustrates me more than a patient who ignores instructions. I cleaned and redressed the wound in silence. Next time call me or Yanni. Understood? Understood. Wife. The word came out a little flushed. I did not correct him. He leaned against the cart quietly and promised himself he would stop trying to prove things before he was ready. Wang Shi, who had taken a whip across the arm earlier that evening, moaned loud enough to disturb the whole camp. The guards came over and warned her. She went quiet. The next morning we ate leftover dumplings and set off again. The Ji family had to redistribute Wang Shi's load among themselves, which only made everyone angrier at her and Ji Xiaoying. By nightfall we reached a small town with an inn. I took a private room as usual. It cost 1 tael here, which included hot water and 5 steamed buns. Good value. In the middle of the night, something scraped against the wooden wall outside. A shadow passed the door. Pei Yanni and I both opened our eyes at the same moment. Killing intent. Someone had come. My husband sensed it too, but quickly closed his eyes and went still. He knew he could not reveal himself. I slipped out of the room quietly. In the dim hallway, I found a small mark on our door and door plate. Someone had tagged our room as a target. I covered a smile with my hand. I quickly swapped the door plates between our room and the G family's room across the hall, added matching marks to their door, and erased the ones on ours. Then I went back inside. My husband had been watching through half-closed eyes. He understood immediately what I had done. Less than half an hour later, screaming erupted from the G family's room, furniture crashing, voices panicking. The inn's guards rushed over. After a brief struggle, the black-clad assassins broke through the window and fled. Everyone came out to see what happened. The lead guard, Chow Yuan, surveyed the scene and announced that since someone clearly had a personal grudge against the G family, they would be responsible for the damages. The inn owner demanded 30 taels for the broken furniture. Ji Hung immediately pointed at my husband and me, insisting the attackers had been coming for us. I kept my expression concerned and helpful. Cousin, please be careful. If you're suggesting the emperor or someone connected to him sent killers, that could be seen as very disrespectful. Ji Hung went quiet. Then I added sweetly that of course, if it had been enemies of the Pei family, then the Ji family had really taken the blow on our behalf, and we were terribly sorry, and weren't we lucky to be family. The Ji family nearly shook with rage at being told they had heroically shielded us from our enemies. The inn owner and guards had by then noticed the marks on the original door and the signs of advanced scouting, and also that Ji Heng's father had been an official with many enemies. The evidence pointed to the Ji family as the actual target. The Ji family paid. A guard negotiated the price down slightly as a goodwill gesture. They spent the rest of the night huddled together behind a curtain over the broken window, too frightened to sleep. I laced everyone's water with spring water from my storage space and soaked my feet in it. By morning we were fine. The Ji family looked terrible. Later that day, I overheard Ji Bin gathering the Ji family together to suggest that since someone clearly wanted the Pei family dead but could not act openly, the Ji family might be rewarded for finishing the job themselves. The eldest son, Ji Jun, quietly pointed out the obvious. Once the job was done, they would be loose ends. People who knew too much rarely survived. Lady Lu remembered the fear she had felt when the exile decree came and decided they should do nothing and watch from the sidelines. That afternoon, during a rest break, I went to fill water alone at a secluded spot. Within moments, a figure appeared 3 meters away and dropped to one knee. This subordinate greets the princess consort. We failed to protect you last night. Please punish us. The Pei family's hidden soldiers had arrived. The soldier introduced himself as Shadow 9. He explained that after the Pei family's collapse, many of their hidden guards had been killed or captured. Only the 50 fighters remained, following at a distance as my husband had instructed before the disaster, to stay hidden unless absolutely necessary. I asked if there were more soldiers beyond these 50. He hesitated, then confirmed there had been private soldiers, but only my husband knew how to contact them. Whether any survived the campaign was unknown. Shadow 9 said they were ready to fight their way out on my order. The escort guards were not strong enough to stop them. I shook my head. Running was not the answer. The Emperor was watching for exactly that. The moment we fled, he could label us as rebels and send both official soldiers and private bounty hunters after us. My husband was still injured. And even if we escaped, where would we go? Stay hidden. Do not act without my signal. Shadow 9 accepted the order without argument and showed me the contact method before disappearing. When I returned, I found my husband sitting under a tree hitting himself on the head with his fist, grimacing. Stop that. What if you knock yourself even more foolish? He looked up with a pitiful expression. 6 months of genuinely being a fool had made the act completely seamless. I checked his pulse quietly. The blood pooling in his head from his old injury was pressing on the nerves. With proper acupuncture and circulation treatment, recovery was possible. But now was not the time to reveal those skills. No one would believe me yet. I stood behind him and pressed the acupressure points at his temples. The pain eased visibly. That evening we camped outdoors again. When I suggested to Pei Yani, just loud enough for nearby Ji family members to hear, that we We're lucky to have the G family with us since family sticks together through hardship and surely they would protect us if trouble came. The G family overheard every word. They were furious. Wang Shi declared I was trying to use them as a human shield. Ji Hung and Ji Bin huddled together to figure out how to avoid being dragged into whatever danger followed the Pei family. While they worried, I quietly slipped 20 eggs from my storage space into the undergrowth, rubbed them with dirt, and guided Pei Yunyi to discover them. Big sister, come look. I ran over and performed my best surprised face. Wild eggs. So many. Grab them all. Tonight we eat well. Pei Yunyi felt guilty about taking all the eggs, worrying the mother hen would come back to an empty nest.
I stared at him.
A capital city boy, truly. The hen will lay more. But if we leave them, you go hungry tonight. This is how things work out here. He understood and filled his shirt with eggs. We came back down the mountain with wild shepherds, purse greens too. That evening my mother-in-law managed the rice pot confidently. She had been learning from other exile women along the way and was genuinely improving. I fried the eggs with a small piece of cured pork fat, added the chopped greens, and served it all over the mixed rice as a simple bowl meal. Pei Yunyi fed my husband so he would not strain his injured hands. My husband smiled his full smile and gave his brother a thumbs up. The Ji family watched and waited for my mother-in-law to send food over. When nothing came, Jibin started complaining loudly that she had forgotten her obligations to her elders. She pretended not to hear. I had Pei Yunyi take a spare bowl of food to the guards and asked to borrow their whetstone for a knife. He came back with both the stone and 5 copper coins. The guards had paid for their meal rather than accept it as a gift, keeping things proper. They could not afford to look like they were taking food from exiles. I pocketed the coins without comment. Ji Xiaoying muttered that no one knew what was really in food given by someone like me. I turned to my husband cheerfully. Shall I tell you a story? He looked confused but played along. There's an old saying, the fox who cannot reach the grapes declares them sour. Ji Xiaoying bit her own tongue trying to respond and spent the next minute coughing. While the others washed dishes and clothes at the stream, I made tomorrow's food, shepherd's purse buns and steamed eggs, dough-proofing near the fire. My husband sat guard over the bags and watched me shape the buns.
You are very good at this, he said.
Don't be too impressed, I told him. Now sit still and let me treat your wounds after. Across the camp, guard Wang De kept craning his neck to watch. His superior, Chao Yuan, kicked him and told him to just ask in the morning if I would sell any buns. The other guards overheard and quietly made note of my steamed buns for morning. After treating my husband's wounds, healing well, helped along by the spring water and his martial artist's constitution, I told him he could try walking a short distance tomorrow. He was so excited he sat up too fast, got a nosebleed, and passed out briefly. I told the family it was just his old condition and pressed the acupressure points on his head until he steadied. Secretly, I was beginning to think acupuncture could help him significantly. He had the perfect head for it. He noticed my thoughtful expression and looked uneasy. That night, I signaled Shadow 9 with a gesture. A while later, masked figures crept toward the camp, deliberately close to a guard who was relieving himself. The figures muttered loudly enough to be heard. Find the Pei and Ji families, kill whoever you can, collect the reward. The guard pulled up his trousers and blew his whistle. Everyone jolted awake, grabbing sticks and fire pokers. The 4 masked figures took one look at the commotion and fled. The guard told everyone what he had overheard. Someone had posted a bounty on both our heads. The Ji family erupted at us. Lady Lu cursed the Pei family loudly. Other exiles edged away from us like we carried plague. I kept innocently insisting that the Ji and Pei families were in this together and should stand united, which made the Ji family even more frantic to distance themselves. Eventually, the lead guard told everyone to go back to sleep. My plan had worked. The real assassins from the inn would lie low for a while after that close call. They could not afford to be exposed as Imperial agents. The fake attack tonight bought us 2 or 3 months of relative safety. I gave everyone spring water, mixed with a calming tonic from my storage space. They slept deeply. The G family stayed up arguing about how to cut ties with us completely. They decided to find a way to formally separate themselves before we caused them any more trouble. In the morning, guard Wangda came over while we were eating our shepherd's purse buns and boiled eggs. "Would you sell a few of those buns? Name your price." I told him he could just have some. He insisted on paying fairly. We settled on a barter. Half a jean of flour for 4 buns, half a jean of cornmeal for 2. I kept 10 aside for the exchange. Everyone won. The guards got a hot breakfast, I built goodwill, and from now on having extra food would not seem suspicious. We walked until midday, when someone suddenly shouted ahead, "Big snake. Don't let it get away." A guard raised his blade, and most of the exiles scrambled sideways in a panic. The snake was enormous, 3 meters long and fat, clearly several years old. Half the guards got excited about snake soup for lunch and started surrounding it. Before anyone could stop them, one guard got bitten on the foot. The wounded snake panicked and shot straight toward where Pei Yani and I were standing. "That snake is venomous," I shouted, seeing its triangular head. Something shoved me sideways. I stumbled and caught my balance, just in time to hear Pei Yani gasp. The snake had bitten him instead. The guards rushed over. The lead guard, Chow Yuan, shouted to use alcohol to suck out the poison blood. I stepped in quickly. I warned that anyone with mouth sores would absorb the venom themselves. He checked his men first before allowing anyone near the wound. Guard Wangda handed over his water pouch. The bitten guard had already gone pale and unconscious. Pei Yani was frightened but still conscious, just dizzy and weak. I checked his pulse and told my mother-in-law he would survive. The bite was not deep enough to be fatal, a few doses of medicine, and he would recover. She burst into tears of relief, then immediately turned toward the Ji family to ask for help paying for medicine. I watched but did not stop her. The Ji family refused coldly. Ji Bin even said the snake had bitten the right person. My mother-in-law begged. Pei Shishir cried with fury. Then Ji Hung stepped forward, helped my mother-in-law to her feet, and announced that from this day forward, the Ji and Pei families were cutting all ties. Finally, I had been waiting for this moment through all my deliberately provocative behavior. Cutting ties, I walked over holding the dead snake I had just grabbed and squeezed still. The Ji family all stepped back nervously. Then write it down properly. And when the Pei family rises again, don't come crawling back. Lady Lu called my bluff and said fine, write it. My mother-in-law did not hesitate. She tore a strip of clean cloth from her hem, bit her finger, and wrote the severance in blood. Her back was straight. Her hands were steady. Every Ji family member came forward and pressed their bloody fingerprints onto the cloth. My mother-in-law held the stained cloth and said nothing for a long moment. Then I guided her back toward our group and told her, there is an old saying that within 7 paces of a venomous snake, the antidote plant always grows nearby. We could look ourselves rather than wait for the town doctor. She grabbed my arm with desperate hope. Then she noticed the dead snake still dangling from my other hand and nearly fainted. "It is dead, mother. Do not worry." Guard Wangda stared at me. "Do you know how to treat a snake bite?" I told the guards my grandmother had been a palace physician and I had read her notes on snake and insect poisons. Some people immediately dismissed this as book knowledge with no practical use. I kept my voice calm. The doctor from town would take at least half an hour to arrive. This man was deeply poisoned. If the venom reached his organs before then, no one could save him. That was enough. The guards agreed to let me try. I gave clear instructions: tie a cloth tightly above the wound to slow the venom. Then, describe the 2 plants we needed, Banji Lian and Shi Yi Ji Hua, drawing their shapes in the dirt and explaining where they tended to grow. I said it 3 times, so everyone had a clear picture in their heads. Pei Shishir wiped her eyes and insisted on coming with me. I handed her a stick and told her to beat the grass ahead of us as we walked, to scare snakes and shake insects loose. My mother-in-law stayed behind to boil water. We searched methodically. I found the first Banji Lian plant, and once others had a real specimen to compare against, the search moved faster. Shadow 9's team quietly found more from the forest shadows and passed them over. I crushed the plants and packed them onto both victims' wounds, then brewed a small amount into a decoction. I quietly added spring water from my space while pretending to stir, doubling the healing effect. Within minutes, the unconscious guard's breathing eased. His color improved. The twitching stopped. Then something unexpected happened. I felt a shift in my storage space. I checked with my inner sense and found the herb field had changed. The Shinong Jing book was glowing. I opened it mentally and found the 2 plants I had just used now had full entries, names, properties, and prescriptions. And the plants I had secretly tucked into the herb field were already growing, their color richer than anything in the wild. The pharmacy space had unlocked another shelf. So that is how it works. Plant medicinal herbs in the field, unlock their entries in the book, and the pharmacy expands. I made a mental note to start planting systematically. While I was processing this quietly, 2 guards came running back with a doctor on a donkey, an old man who kept telling them not to slap his animal's backside. The doctor crouched down, checked the guard's pulse, looked at his eyes and tongue, then examined the plants I had used. The poison has stopped spreading. Someone here knows what they are doing. He looked at the remaining plant material approvingly, then asked what snake had done this. I dragged the dead snake over by its tail. The old doctor's eyes went wide despite himself. A 3-meter brown snake with a triangular head, its 7th vertebra crushed where I had squeezed it dead. This one has extremely potent venom. You are all very lucky to be alive. He paused and looked closer. Where are its fangs? I told the doctor I had pulled the fangs out and buried them so nobody would step on them. He nodded approvingly, said a few kind words about my knowledge, prescribed 2 doses for the guard, collected his fee, and left on his donkey. On the way out, he muttered that it was a shame I was a convict. He would have taken me as a student otherwise. The 2 guards escorting him exchanged a look. Having someone with medical knowledge on a long exile journey was genuinely useful. They quietly decided among themselves not to make things unnecessarily difficult for the Pei family. The lead guard called an early halt for the day. 2 injured people, low sun, rough road ahead, better to rest. While we were settling in, Guard Wang helped push the cart without being asked, then handed over a link of cured sausage as thanks from the group. They also split the snake with us, half each. Tell your captain I appreciate it, I said and meant it. Pei Yunyi felt guilty about being bitten and slowing everyone down. I told him cheerfully that thanks to him, we were having a proper meal tonight. I planned it out in my head. Snake broth, sausage stir-fried with bracken fern, leftover filling packed into steamed buns for tomorrow's road food. My husband sat beside Pei Yunyi and asked quietly if it still hurt. Pei Yunyi said no, that his wound was nothing compared to his brother's injuries. Then he patted my husband's shoulder gently and said not to worry. My husband sat there being comforted by his 10-year-old brother and said nothing. Pei Shishir came back with a large armful of bracken fern. I blanched it, split it between a cold salad with wild garlic and a stir-fry with the sausage, then made corn cakes pressed against the side of the hot pot while the snake broth bubbled. The smell spread through the whole camp. Guard Wangda eventually came over and asked sheepishly if I could teach them to improve their own cooking. I helped them work chopped wild garlic into their flatbread dough and show them a simple broth with sausage strips. Nothing fancy, but better than what they had. When I came back, Ji Xiaoying was muttering about village women who thought too highly of themselves. Another exile nearby told her flatly that at least village women could cook, and right now she was lower than a village woman. Wang Shi pretended not to hear. Our meal was wonderful: snake broth, corn cakes filled with sausage and fern, cold garlic salad on the side. The siblings ate with real happiness for the first time in days. The Ji family chewed their cold buns and watched. Lady Lu declared that if the Pei family came crawling back and offered to cook for them the whole way to Lingnan, she might consider forgiving them. I did not even look up from my bowl. The Ji family had been watching us eat and whispering among themselves. Lady Lu decided that if she played this right, she could get food from us while pretending to mend fences. She sent the meek elder daughter-in-law, Wu Shi, over to do the asking. Wu Shi came over holding 2 empty bowls, apologized awkwardly for not helping earlier, then mentioned that it was cold, Lady Lu had a cough, and snake broth was very nourishing, and perhaps a little cured sausage as well, for the old woman's health. Pei Yani looked ready to explode. Pei Shir bit her tongue to keep from screaming. I picked up a carrying pole and weighed it in my hand thoughtfully. Bones connected by sinew. Is that what you said? I have never actually tested that. Shall we find out? Wushir backed away quickly, muttered that we had cruel hearts, and fled. The Ji family watched her return empty-handed and cut her dinner ration in punishment. My husband sat eating his corn cake slowly, watching me with bright eyes. After dinner, Pei Shir and my mother-in-law practiced making steamed buns together. Pei Yun, still recovering from the venom, fell asleep against the cart. My husband tried to dodge his medicine treatment, hiding behind a tree and insisting his wounds were fine and I should save the medicine for his brother. I pointed at him sternly. Get over here. Your brother's condition and yours are completely different. We have plenty of medicine. We found good quality qi yi hua today, and that alone can be traded for silver at the next town. He came out from behind the tree looking sheepish. Foolish but kind-hearted, this one. Once everyone was settled, I lay down and pretended to sleep while sending my awareness into the herb field space to properly examine what had changed. The upgrade had brought more than I had time to notice earlier. I needed to understand the full picture. Inside the space, I found the hourglass had gained an extra quarter of time, 15 additional minutes added to my daily allowance. That came from planting the 2 medicinal herbs earlier. So the herb field worked like a collection system. The more plant and animal species I cultivated, the more the space expanded. The pharmacy unlocked one shelf at a time as the field grew. I also noticed small glows rising from the rice plants I had sown earlier. They were already flowering. The grapevines and peach trees gave off tiny lights too, and so did the fish from the Imperial Garden Pond. Even the vegetables contributed a little. Everything living in the space feeds it. I felt a mix of excitement and mild despair. Other heroines in these stories traveled with a billion tales of supplies and just relaxed. I had to actively farm and collect species like I was completing achievements in a game. Still, knowing the rules meant I could play the game. I would collect every medicinal herb I could find on this road. I opened my eyes. My husband was sitting beside me against the tree, awake, watching me with a warm, steady gaze. I turned my head too quickly. Our lips brushed. Neither of us moved. We just stayed there, close enough to share breath. He said quietly that I smelled nice and looked very pretty. It was an extremely simple sentence. My face went completely hot anyway. When I reached under the blanket to find somewhere neutral to put my hand, I accidentally pressed down on his injured wrist. He hissed. I took his hand and checked the bandaging. No blood, but the tendons inside were still healing, and any pressure hurt. I added a little more medicine and told him to stop moving around. He nodded quietly. His expression was thoughtful. He had decided that whatever happened next, whether I cared about him or was simply staying out of obligation, he would get better, get stronger, and spend the rest of his life making sure I was protected and at peace. He closed his eyes and quietly began his internal cultivation practice. He had been doing this every night since the journey began. It was working. In the small hours, Pei Shir kept watch by the fire. Everyone else slept. My husband looked at me sleeping beside him. I apparently dreamed about something delicious and licked my lips. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he leaned over and pressed the lightest possible kiss to my lips, pulled back immediately, closed his eyes, and sat very still against the tree with his heart pounding. He had been raised to be a proper gentleman his whole life. Tonight was the first time he had done something so impulsive. He felt ashamed of himself. The corners of his mouth curved upward and stayed there. The next morning, the bitten guard woke up with color back in his face. The guards were visibly relieved and looked at me with new respect. I found Chow Yuan before we set off and proposed a half-day stop to gather medicinal herbs. Good ones grew in this area, as the doctor had confirmed. We could sell them at the next town for travel money, and I would give the guards a 30% share of whatever we found. The exiles perked up immediately. The guards glanced at each other and waited to hear what Chow Yuan would say. Chow Yuan agreed to the half-day stop, leaving it to a group vote. Most people raised their hands. Ji Xiaoying tried to poison the idea by warning about snakes and wild animals, but people were tired and hungry enough to try anyway. The Ji family declined and just gathered a little wild greens to look busy. They did not want to reveal that they still had money hidden away. My mother-in-law worried about me going up the mountain. I promised we would stay visible on the lower slope and took Pei Shishir with me. I pointed out useful plants as we went. Xia Ku Chao with its small purple flowers, good for cooling the body and clearing the eyes, cheap to sell but worth keeping for drinking water on the road. People nearby listened and gathered handfuls. Then we moved on to find the more valuable plants from yesterday. I also spotted copper coin herb, which clears heat and helps with water retention. I explained it as we walked. People started treating me like a walking field guide. Whenever nobody was watching, I quietly planted specimens in my space and watched the Shinong Jing icons light up one by one. Then Pei Shishir accidentally dug up something unfamiliar, a lumpy dark root. Konjac, I told her, barely containing my excitement. Edible. Dig them all up. I used my wood ability to soften the soil under her hands so her nails would stop tearing. She found 5 large konjac roots, without knowing why the digging had suddenly gotten so much easier. After half a day, everyone came back down carrying herbs, wild vegetables, and various plants. The mood was noticeably better. People felt useful. At the next small town, we exchanged the herbs for several hundred copper coins. Not a fortune, but real money earned on the road. The Ji family, who had done barely anything, watched with barely concealed fury. Not much, I said pleasantly when people commented. Just a little labor money. Other exiles had warmed to me through the morning. Word spread that I had taught them what to look for and explained the uses of every plant I found. Some people had heard of the Pei family's military service and quietly believed the treason charges were false. When we came out of the town, one older woman pressed 2 eggs into my hands as thanks for teaching her family which herbs to dig. She told me to keep teaching her useful things on the road ahead. Several others slipped me meat pies and steamed buns as we walked back to the convoy. Pei Shishir and I returned to camp with our baskets fuller than when we had left, almost entirely from things other people had given us. Big sister, Pei Shishir said, looking at me with bright eyes, I will follow wherever you go. We will never go hungry. I told Pei Shishir to stop praising me and help sort through our supplies. When we needed things, I quietly slipped away, pulled items from my storage space in a hidden spot, and came back pretending I had just bought them at a stall. My mother-in-law fretted about how much money we were spending. I told her plainly that without enough food, we would fall ill, and sick people cost far more than a good meal. She thought about it and agreed, then asked me to teach her how to identify medicinal herbs on the road, so she would not miss good ones. My husband raised his hand to be included in the lesson too, in his best innocent fool voice. Fine, I said. We will learn as we walk. After a day and a half of continuous walking, we reached a stream and were allowed to stop and wash. Pei Shishir immediately gathered everyone's clothes and ran to do laundry, thrilled at the chance to be properly clean. I said I wanted to try hunting, wild rabbit or pheasant, and asked guard Wangda if I could borrow a bow and 3 arrows. He gave me 5 arrows and the bow outright, saying if I caught anything he trusted I would share. Ji Hung watched and immediately tried to borrow a bow himself. He was refused flatly. Ji Xiaoying tried smiling sweetly at the guard. He told her no and walked away. I headed into the trees with my bow across my back. I had only gone a short distance when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun and drew the bow. It is me, Ji Hung said, stepping out with his hands raised. He smiled and suggested that since my form looked good but I lacked strength, I should let him use the bow, and we could split whatever he caught. No, his expression tightened. He tried a different approach, saying I was clearly capable and wasted on the Pei family, that the Ji household would welcome me, that I should consider my options carefully. I kept my face blank. He moved closer. I would take care of you. I pity you following a fool. I do not need that. He kept moving forward anyway, smiling in a way I found disgusting. I raised the bow and aimed directly at him. Stop. One more step, and I will release this. He froze. Turn around and leave.
Now.
Or this arrow will not miss. Ji-hoon backed away with his hands raised, muttering under his breath as he turned to leave. I heard every word. I pressed my foot to the ground and sent my ability racing through the soil beneath him. Using the grass as cover, I shook a little honey water and flower pollen onto his clothes as he passed. It was early spring. The forest was full of bees. I went back to practicing my archery while he walked away. I needed to get comfortable with ancient tools if I wanted to blend in and hide my abilities. Behind me, I could hear the results, distant shouting, then screaming, then the sound of someone running very fast. I did not look up. At the stream, laundry-washing women watched Ji-hoon come hurtling out of the trees, covered in bees, and leaped directly into the water. He hit his head on a submerged rock and came up sputtering, face already swelling from multiple stings. The women told him off for jumping in without warning. He apologized and mentioned bees. Their eyes lit up. Bees meant a hive, which meant honey. He promised to show them where, then went to fetch his father and uncle to look for it themselves. They searched for a while and found nothing. By then I had already taken the entire hive, bees and all, into my herb field space. Pollinating insects would be essential for the medicinal plants I planned to grow. Elsewhere in the forest, I used my ability to sense underground and found a bamboo grove with fresh shoots coming up. I harvested them all and quietly tucked several bamboo plants and roots into my space for later. Whatever was useful went in. My ability located a pheasant and 2 rabbits. Vines wrapped around them silently. I also found a rabbit warren with 8 young ones and added them to my farming space. Live animals could be kept there. I left 1 male rabbit and the pheasant properly staged, as if I had shot them with arrows. I came back to camp with a rabbit in one hand, a pheasant in the other, a bundle of bamboo shoots under my arm, and the borrowed bow across my back. My husband stood up immediately and came to take the bamboo shoots. He used both forearms since his wrists were still healing. Careful, I told him. Don't tear the wound again. Guard Wangda and the others had come back with a small mountain rat and some herbs, a modest haul. They stared at my catches with mild disbelief. I returned the bow and offered 1 rabbit as rental payment. Wangda insisted on giving me a bundle of dried vegetables in exchange anyway. I gave him half the bamboo shoots in return. My mother-in-law had water boiling by the time I got back. Perfect timing, I said. I wrung the pheasant's neck efficiently. Ji Xiaoying came dragging her laundry bucket back just in time to see the blood fall neatly into the bowl. You are so cruel, she muttered. I did not look up from what I was doing. Ji Xiaoying watched me drain the chicken blood into a bowl and grimaced. I looked up and raised the bloodied cleaver. I know even crueler methods. Shall I show you? She went pale and left quickly, muttering under her breath. I got back to work. The pheasant was only about 3 pounds, not very large, but I quietly added some pre-processed chicken meat from my storage space while nobody was watching, mixing it in smoothly. I set the meat to braise in the pot with bamboo shoots and pressed corn and chive cakes against the inside of the pot to cook in the steam. Simple, but it would smell wonderful. Pei Shir and my mother-in-law went back into the nearby woods to dig for more herbs while the meat cooked. They came back with a good amount of Huang Lian and Huang Qi, both worth decent money at the next town. My mother-in-law was visibly proud. She and Pei Shir were contributing now, not just eating what others provided. When the lid came off the pot, the smell drifted across the whole camp. Other exiles chewed their plain food and inhaled deeply. The Ji family had managed a small pot of cured pork with wild greens, 2 thin slices of meat per person. Ji Pander, one of Ji Jun's daughters, stared longingly toward our pot and said she really wanted meat. Her mother scolded her. Lady Lu had a different idea. She suggested sending the 2 young girls over to ask for food, reasoning that my mother-in-law had always had a soft spot for them, and surely she would not turn away children. The girls picked up their bowls and shuffled over nervously, calling out greetings to my mother-in-law, my husband, Pei Yanyi, and Pei Shir in turn. They ignored me, which I was fine with. Pei Shir told them coolly to go back and eat their own food. My mother-in-law looked at me. I said quietly that she should do whatever she felt was right, just not to overextend ourselves. She nodded, then turned to the two girls. She said she would give them each a bowl of soup, but told them clearly that after today, they should stop calling her aunt. Their faces lit up, and they immediately said she would always be their aunt. Not anymore, she said firmly, loud enough for the whole G family to hear. She ladled soup with a few small pieces of meat and bamboo shoots into their bowls. They held their bowls up eagerly and said nothing more. The two G girls came back triumphant. Before they could eat a single bite, Lady Lu had Wang Shi and Jibin pour the entire contents of both bowls into the communal pot. The girls stared in disbelief at their vanished meal. My mother-in-law watched from across the camp. She said nothing and turned back to her own food. Lady Lu gave the girls a few small pieces and a little broth as reward, then helped herself to a generous serving first. By the time the pot went around, Ji Jun's wife Wu Shi got 2 slices of bamboo shoot and nothing else. The other exiles who had witnessed the whole performance exchanged looks. We ate well. I set aside the remaining chicken broth and told everyone we would use it for noodle soup in the morning. I kneaded a dough and set it aside to rest. Knife-cut noodles tomorrow, I said. Nobody knew what that was, but they were immediately excited. After dinner, Pei Shi wandered off alone toward a quiet corner. Ji Hao followed her in the dark. I noticed and went after them with a fire poker. I found him before he could do much damage and beat him thoroughly. He had no answer for several consecutive strikes to the head and back. By the time he could speak, his face was swollen enough to affect his vision. You animal, I told him pleasantly. Would you like me to ensure this never happens again? I had actually retrieved a blade from my space and was considering it when Ji Heng's voice called out for his brother from the darkness. Pei Shi grabbed my arm and pulled me away. She was right that getting into a loud confrontation here would only create problems for her reputation. I gave Ji Hao 2 farewell kicks and ran. Before I left the shadows, I sent a thin vine creeping toward the 2 brothers and sprayed something onto them from a small vial. The mosquitoes tonight would eat very well. I felt good about this. Back at the camp, I told Pei Shi to never go anywhere alone after dark again, and that I would not mention what had happened. She nodded, still shaky, quietly angry at herself for not having learned self-defense from her brother when she had the chance. My husband watched us return and let out a quiet breath of relief. His eyes moved to the Ji family's position, and for a moment something sharp and cold passed through them. Touch my sister again. See what happens. Guard Wanda came by and asked if I could make more food tomorrow morning since the team had enjoyed today's cooking. I said I was tired from hunting and maybe another day. They left and my husband immediately said, "Wife, I am in pain." I reached over to check his bandaging.
Where?
Head or wound. Nearly a month had passed and my husband's worst wounds had closed to small healing lines needing only light maintenance. I cleaned and redressed them by firelight, privately admitting that watching his hands gesture in the flickering light had made me lose focus for a full 10 seconds. Beautiful people are a hazard. That is a fact. He thanked me in a warm, gentle voice with eyes full of affection, and I told him very firmly to go to sleep. That night I woke to hear mosquitoes near my ear. I opened my eyes to spray some odorless repellent and noticed my husband's bare arm sticking out from under the blanket, sleeve neatly rolled up. Every time a mosquito landed, he would shake his arm, drawing them back to himself.
He was not hot.
He was keeping the mosquitoes away from me. I applied anti-itch cream quietly to his bitten spots and sprayed repellent around us both. He opened his eyes slightly, saw me treating him, and smiled to himself in the dark. The princess consort does care about me after all. Across the camp, the Ji family had a terrible night. Mosquitoes everywhere, worst of all around the brothers. Ji Heng still had a swollen face from the bee stings. Ji Hao was swollen from my beating. The mosquitoes showed no mercy to either. The next morning a guard walked past both brothers in the dim light and screamed. We ate knife-cut noodles in chicken broth for breakfast. Everyone was happy. A month and a half into the journey, we reached a small town at sunset and were allowed to stop for supplies. Pei Shi and Pei Yani went off with spending money. My husband stayed beside me. Aren't you going? I asked. Wherever wife goes, I go. He had become rather clingy. I took him to buy shoes. Our current ones had worn through. At the shoe stall, we found the Ji siblings had bought up all the right sizes, smirking at us pointedly. Ji-hung offered to sell us 2 pairs out of the kindness of his heart, citing old friendship with my husband. My husband started to agree. He did not mind swallowing his pride for his family's sake. I cut in before he could speak. No need. This is a whole town. We will find our own. I took my husband's arm and walked away. Ji-hung watched us go, his eyes following me with an expression I recognized immediately and found disgusting. He had apparently decided that the long road to Lingnan needed some entertainment, and that I would do nicely. His gaze drifted to a small medicine shop down the lane. Something in his expression made the back of my neck prickle. My husband wanted to go back and buy shoes from Ji-hung anyway, to avoid trouble. I shook my head and told him I had spotted an old woman selling shoes down the road, and to wait here while I chased her down. I gave him money for a portion of fried small fish from a roadside stall, finger-sized river fish, fried crispy in oil, and told him I would be right back. I found a quiet spot, pulled a few plain cloth shoes from my storage space, rubbed some dust on them to look worn and purchased, and came back.
My
husband was standing by the fish stall like a statue, holding the wrapped parcel, while several bold village women tried to ask him his name and whether he was married. Not taking new inquiries, I announced, appearing behind them. They scattered. He smiled at me like sunlight breaking through clouds and held out a small fish. I opened my mouth without thinking. My tongue accidentally brushed his fingertips. He went completely still. Good and crispy, I said quickly. Let's bring the rest back for everyone. He said nothing the whole way back, but his ears were extremely
red.
That evening I borrowed the inn's kitchen and made corn rice with egg and chive stir-fry, plus the stewed chicken I had secretly retrieved from my storage space. My mother-in-law tried to get everyone to be frugal. I pointed out that my husband and Pei Yunny were still recovering and needed proper food. Nobody argued after that. When I took the bowls out after dinner, a serving boy stopped me and offered me a cup of complimentary tea to sample. I glanced sideways and caught a glimpse of fabric at the corner of the hallway. I accepted the cup graciously, shielded it with my arm, and tipped the contents into my storage space while pretending to drink. Then I handed back the empty cup with compliments. Ji-hung, watching from the shadows, smiled to himself. That evening I quietly found out he had taken a private room, an unusual expense for someone who had been complaining about money. I did not need more than that to understand his plan. While he was out, I used a vine to carry the doctored tea water from my storage space and pour it carefully into his own cup on his table. He came back, drank it himself with his wine, and thought cheerfully about his evening plans as the effects began. That night, he pushed open his door looking for me. Instead, he found the serving boy I had lured into his room by pretending to search for a dropped coin and offering a reward. The boy had gone in, the door had shut, and no further sounds had come out. I went to bed wondering what the morning would bring. The next day, Ji-hung woke up, looked sideways, and screamed. The serving boy woke up too and screamed back. The inn owner and guards came running. The Ji family rushed in behind them. Everyone saw everything. Ji-bin walked in to find his son disheveled, chasing a pockmarked serving boy around the room with a pillow. The boy was wearing nothing but his own jacket tied hastily at the waist. The serving boy immediately burst into tears when he saw the inn owner, wailing that he had served the gentleman all night and was now being attacked instead of paid. Ji-hung denied everything and tried to blame the boy for taking advantage of him while he was drunk. The inn owner pointed out that being drunk was the most charitable interpretation, and somehow that was worse. Ji-hung looked up and spotted me in the crowd at the back. He understood immediately. So he tried to drag me down with him, announcing loudly that he and I had arranged to meet last night, that he had only ended up with the serving boy because of the dark and a misunderstanding. Every head in the room turned to look at me. My mother-in-law erupted before I could speak, calling Ji-hung a mad dog and confirming I had been in our room all night without leaving once. She looked ready to physically attack him. The Ji family doubled down, claiming I had led Ji-hung on and abandoned him, making this whole situation my fault. I laughed. Me have feelings for you? Look at yourself. I would not look twice. Then I straightened up and said clearly, my husband was kind and good, and I was completely devoted to him.
He was more than enough for me.
We had a very happy marriage and no one else interested me at all. To make the point impossible to argue with, I stood on my toes and kissed him on the corner of his mouth. He blinked with his most innocent expression, heart absolutely soaring. My mother-in-law added her voice. Her son had been the kingdom's greatest warrior, handsome and brilliant, completely beyond someone like Ji Heng's reach. The crowd was still processing all of this when the serving boy stuck his head out from behind the guards with a deeply unsatisfied expression and announced that he had proof the gentleman was entirely capable, and further proof that he was entirely underwhelming. The inn guards whistled. Ji Heng's face went through several colors. Then he fainted. Even that, the inn owner muttered. The Ji family paid 13 taels total, 10 for damages and the serving boy's compensation, 3 for the doctor. Ji Heng lay face down while his brother applied medicine, silently swearing revenge on me. Ji Hao helped him, looked away, and said nothing. We set off while the Ji family were still dealing with the aftermath, making them late and earning a sharp scolding from the guards. Guards being guards, one even patted Ji Heng's backside in passing and made a remark about his soft city-bred skin. Ji Heng ground his teeth and walked faster. My husband spent the whole morning walking beside me, blocking the sun with his body and asking every few minutes if I was thirsty. I was not thirsty. Then he said he was thirsty and asked me to help since his wrists were not strong enough to lift the water pouch properly. I held it up for him to drink. Water ran down the corner of his mouth and along his throat. I stared for slightly too long. "What are you looking at, wife?" he asked, with the expression of someone who already knew. "Nothing," I said, and drank from the same pouch. His eyes went very warm, and he said nothing more. At midday the guards called a rest. My husband excused himself to relieve himself and quietly slipped away to find Shadow 9. "My lord," Shadow 9 stared. "You have recovered your mind?" My husband told him to keep it completely secret. Not even the family needed to know yet, as it would be harder for them to maintain the pretense. He gave the order that the soldiers were to follow my instructions unless he contacted them directly. Then I came looking for him and found him crouching and staring at the bushes claiming he had seen a rabbit. I glanced at Shadow 9's hiding spot, recognized it for what it was, and told my husband the rabbit had probably run off and to come back to eat. After he left, Shadow 9 and Shadow 10 stepped out looking guilty. "We came without being called," Shadow 9 admitted. "The Ji family concerned us. I told them to go back and that everything here was under control." They left and reportedly had damp shirts by the time they were out of sight, which I considered an appropriate result. 2 days later, the Ji family arrived at my side of camp, looking miserable. The heat and poor food had given everyone mouth sores. The guards had directed them to me. My siblings-in-law warned me not to go. I went anyway. I asked for 2 taels as consultation and medicine fees. Lady Lu exploded. Ji Xiaoying complained that I only charged others 2 copper coins. I looked at them both calmly. Other people did not try to ruin my reputation in front of a crowd. I told the Ji family they were welcome to wait for the next town and find a doctor there if 2 taels was too much. They grumbled and argued among themselves, but did not actually agree to pay. Wang Shi had already gathered a bunch of xia ku chow from the roadside, announcing she had asked around and everyone else was using it to reduce heat, and they did not need to pay me anything. Lady Lu erupted at me again for trying to extort them. I said calmly that the herb had some effect but not enough for their condition. Then I walked away. I was not going to argue. They boiled the herb and drank it along with everyone else. After lunch, the convoy set out again. Within half an hour, the Ji family members began dropping one by one, stomach cramps, vomiting, then worse. By the time Chow Yuan called a halt to investigate, most of them were lying on the ground, looking wretched. Other exiles backed away immediately, worried about contagion. The guards could not find a doctor. There was nothing but small villages for 2 days' walk in any direction. Wang De suggested they ask me. I came over with my husband trailing at my heels. He looked at the Ji family on the ground and asked cheerfully if the ground was cooler down there. I said probably yes. I quoted 20 taels to treat everyone, given the complexity, discounted from 2 taels each for the number of patients. Ji Xiaoying screamed that I had said 2 taels earlier, and now I was charging 10 times as much. Ji Hung accused me weakly of poisoning them deliberately and then offering to treat them as a cover. My husband lunged at him. I caught his arm. In the process, he managed to step very firmly on Ji Heng's foot, which caused an immediate and unpleasant accident. Chow Yuan told the Ji family they were insulting someone who had saved one of his men's lives and suggested they watch their words. I followed Lady Lu away from the group to observe her symptoms properly, then came back. "You have been poisoned," I said. Ji Xiaoying immediately shrieked that I had just confessed. I walked over and slapped her. "I said you are poisoned. I did not say I did it. If your ears are not working, I can remove them and check." She backed behind her mother, too cramped from the illness to fight back. Chow Yuan asked me seriously what poison it was. He needed to know if this was accidental or intentional. "They ate Chongshan berries," I said. "It is a medicinal plant. The berries are blue this season. Look at their fingernails and clothing, blue-black stains. They also drank xia ku chow water, which interacted badly with it. Combined with how much internal heat they already had, the result is what you see." Wu Shi quietly moved her 2 daughters behind her. Wang Shi lunged at Wu Shi, blaming her daughters for picking the poisonous berries. Wu Shi backed away, insisting they had not known and had eaten the berries themselves. I said I would wait for them to finish fighting before treating anyone. Wang Shi stopped immediately and apologized with a smile like nothing had happened. I set my terms. I would treat them, but for 3 days they had to follow my dietary instructions exactly. They agreed immediately. When you are doubled over with stomach cramps, you do not argue with a doctor. I went back to our camp, pretended to dig through my pack, and produced a packet of powder from my storage space, actually a packet of kaolin, very effective for stopping diarrhea. I also handed over some kudzu root, astragalus, and coptis to be boiled into a decoction. Pei Shishir thought I should not bother helping them after everything they had done. I pointed out that 20 taels was worth my time, and that building a reputation as a healer on this road had its uses. My mother-in-law said simply that whatever I decided, she would support. Within an hour of taking the medicine, the worst was over. The Ji family said nothing grateful. Lady Lu complained loudly about the 20 taels while drinking her medicine. Ji Hung, who had his own separate misery to deal with from his earlier adventure, lay very still and said nothing at all. Rumors spread quickly that Ji Hung had not quite made it to the bushes in time. The guards glanced at his back and tried not to laugh. Ji Hung fought with several people. 2 days later, the convoy reached a large town. I bought a whole pig's head, 2 long strips of cured pork, a bundle of sausage, and 2 large blocks of blood tofu. I walked back, carrying the pig's head and swinging the rest. Ji Xiaoying made a bitter remark. I tripped her with my foot as she turned to walk away. She face-planted on the path. I kept walking. That evening I took the pig's head apart entirely, sliced the meat for a cold dish dressed with vinegar and wild garlic, split the bones for broth, added dried vegetables, and put in the blood tofu. Large bowls of corn rice on the side. Pei Yunyi delivered a portion to the guards as usual and came back with white rice and flour in exchange. We ate well. The Ji family watched. After dinner, my husband followed me to the stream like a small shadow and pointed at the sunset over the hills. I sat on a stone to watch. He sat beside me. I turned to ask if he thought it was beautiful. He was already looking at me. "You are more beautiful," he said. We were very close. The light was perfect. Neither of us moved away. Our lips had just touched when my stomach lurched violently. I turned my head away and retched. My husband sat up quickly when I retched and sniffed himself in a panic, worried he smelled bad. I told him I had just eaten too much, and my stomach felt heavy. He relaxed, and I put the thought aside. I pressed acupressure points on his head to ease the pain, and he fell asleep on my knee within minutes. I watched the last light fade from the sky. Then it hit me. My monthly had not come since arriving in this world, over a month ago. I had brushed it off. The exile road was harsh. Stress and poor conditions could easily disrupt a cycle. I had not thought twice about it, until just now, when nausea had rolled through me out of nowhere. I checked my own pulse. Then I checked it again. I gently moved my husband's head onto a folded jacket, slipped away quietly, found a hidden corner, and stepped into my storage space. I used 10 pregnancy tests.
Different brands.
Same result every single time. I stood there staring at them. One night, just one night, granted, a rather eventful one, and here we were. My first instinct was to end it. I was alone in an unfamiliar world, still finding my footing, in no position to raise a child properly. But as I stood there thinking, my hand moved to my stomach without meaning to. Something connected to me was already there. I went to look for the medication I needed in the pharmacy shelves. It was on the highest shelf at the back, completely out of reach until the space upgraded further. "Wife, where are you?" My husband's voice. I stepped out of the space and appeared calmly. "I am here. What is it?" "It is dark. Dangerous." He stood there looking conflicted, with things clearly unsaid. I did not know then that he was wrestling with his own question, whether to tell me he had recovered his mind, and whether I would pull away from him if I knew the truth.
"I did not go far," I said.
"Let us go back." We walked back in silence. I pressed down the tangled feeling inside. Whether to keep the baby or not, I had not decided yet. I would sleep on it. He walked quietly beside me, making his own silent decision. If I wanted to leave him someday, he would let me go and protect me from a distance for the rest of my life. But he hoped, in some small way, that I did not completely dislike him. He thought about the way I sometimes looked at his face without meaning to. The way I had kissed him in front of everyone that morning. Maybe I did not dislike him quite as much as he feared. I fell asleep by the fire without meaning to and dreamed of a misty place with a small pond and 2 round chubby children crawling toward me as fast as their little limbs could carry them. "Mama, don't leave us." "Mama, do you not like us?" I pinched their soft cheeks and held them close. They pressed their faces against mine, and I felt completely, helplessly happy. I woke up to birdsong and cool morning air, with that warmth still in my chest. I lay there thinking about the dream. Blood recognizes blood, they say. Maybe the little one had reached out in the night to plead its case.
Well,
it had made a convincing argument. I decided to keep it. I was not going to tell anyone yet, not until I had figured things out, but I was keeping it. The father's genetics were clearly excellent, and the foolishness was injury-related, not inherited. My husband came over trembling carefully with a bowl of porridge. His tendons were reconnecting, but fine motor control had not fully returned. He looked like he might spill at any moment. I drank it and thanked him. The nausea came back briefly, then passed. I breathed through it. By the time we set off, my husband had recovered enough to pull the cart with his shoulder, taking the load off the rest of us. The G family watched with barely concealed resentment, all of them loaded down unevenly while their men carried as little as possible. Ji Xiaoying eventually drifted over to my husband's side and started making conversation, hinting heavily that she was exhausted and her load was very heavy, angling for him to offer to put her things on the cart. He kept walking without offering anything. Then she moved a little closer. He turned to her. "Your breath smells. Please stand further away." I nearly choked trying not to laugh. She stood there with her mouth open. She did not leave.